Which is good to know. Well, I didn't get a call.
Okay.
Your system is ready.
New favorite
Well, we just, so we didn't have to delay anymore. I took this right now one day. And that's when I started with me.
Those are emails. And then some of the stuff, like weather.
This is old.
It's going to become on the Manitou Springs.
But I haven't done this before.
Okay.
I used to do first aid.
Whereas if you want to buy
Yeah, I saw that.
Well, we got first aid.
We've been allowed to buy other Colorado Springs is not specialized equipment.
it's only specialized. Well, that's what we're talking about, whether it could be considered.
No one needs it.
There's specialized
Basically, it's kind of like, in this case,
it's a fine line, yes.
Yeah.
At least he's consistent.
you can earn, right? 3/4
So you won't be here in Florida. You gotta know Gene. Yeah.
okay.
Just something different.
Yeah, that's fine. Outside's good.
Yeah, it's been around for a long time. That one I know. That one's been around. It's been around. It used to be Untitled Chapter.
Gee!
He is, all he needs is the probably.
Oh, well, that's exactly what I'm doing. Very supportive.
That's exactly
That's a new one.
Well, I know you're here Friday anyway, so
Yeah, the changes.
never mind that.
You know,
Hi.
Can I have everybody's attention now that Brian's here, we can start? So thanks for being here, Brian. We're going to take a picture, so let's do it out front, outside.
Stop, Brian.
you're going to be interacting with reverse, which is messy society.
I'm bald.
So you won't be alone now.
I would like to forget this time of my life, so
We have to cross the circle bridge on one end to insurance.
Official meeting? official started the meeting, or? No. Okay, I wasn't sure. I didn't catch
New faces to come down.
Yeah.
There's a debate whether to lock them out or not.
Right?
I'm taking notes.
Are you back?
I am back.
Or are you just covering?
Nope, I am back and,
As Raymond?
yep. And I don't want pictures of. No, I'm good. I missed it. My little town of Rama has a safe. How can I pass that up?
Well, things haven't changed much.
I didn't miss anything. I did see you're gonna try and get new members. Next year, or?
Well, it's just the
talk?
annual cycle, it's a third of the group every year.
No. New members like Monument and the other cities. I was reading in some. No? Maybe I was imagining.
What do they need to do for teaching?
Okay, maybe not. Maybe it was something a little. Okay.
Nothing formal.
Yeah. Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Same step, opinion, same step,
Yeah.
First thing they ask is they will do receive if they go to the voters to get approval. So the board says, yeah, it will receive you. Then they say, whatever, and it's about to get those ones, put it on their ballot.
Yeah.
And if they get the vote to join,
Yeah. So first, the board has to approve.
But the board can bring them in without each member of the government having a vote.
No.
Not like an IT.
Okay, so we're upstairs.
If you think it's their vote, and they say yes, would you? So that's the first step, and they said, yeah, we will recruit you.
Thank you. I'm doing okay. Doing good.
Tight in there.
Are the chairs?
Feel free to stand. Manager will have it right. It is tight.
Oh, I see, yeah.
Almost back to normal.
I was like, what are you all suited up for?
Well, we do it on Emily's, take a picture.
Oh,
Dressed in so I want to make sure I wasn't the one you're speaking
good thing I didn't wear my shorts and flip-flops, I guess. No.
to. You're taking it.
This is a replacement for the budget for Green Mountain Falls. Just a different carryover.
All right, everybody back in? Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order. It's good to see everybody. Thank you all for being here and taking time out of your day. People in the audience as well. Let me start off by reading the purpose statement for the Citizens Advisory Committee. The primary objective of the CAC is to ensure capital maintenance and public transportation projects and programs approved by the voters at the November 2nd, 2004, November 6, 2012, and November 7, 2017 ballot measures are accomplished with PPRTA funds. This committee reports directly to the Board of Directors.
Due to the solid attendance, Ed drew the short straw today, and he cannot vote until somebody leaves.
Okay. You got that, Ed? You can still participate, of course, and we anxiously await your participation. Okay. Do I hear a motion for approval of the agenda? Tom? So move. Cheryl? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Any public comment for items not on the agenda? Members of the committee? Any members of the audience? Seeing none, thank you. There a motion for approval of the minutes for the October 2nd meeting? Joan? Have a second. Tony? Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Financial reports. Ms. Bev.
Good afternoon. On the first page of the financial reports, August we received $10,005,204, and compared to our budget, we're $859 ahead for the month, so 9.4%, or $7,037,000 ahead for the year. So we're just doing so well this year compared to budget. And compared to last year, we're also doing well. That's on page 2. We were ahead for the month $435,000 when comparing against last August actual, and we're ahead $4,061,000 for the year. So does anybody have any questions on the financial reports?
Tom?
I've got a question. I've got a concern in the maintenance expenditures that we're 2/3 of the way through the year with this report, and other than Green Mountain Falls, everybody is well below that for expenditures.
One of the reasons is that we're getting some of the biggest invoices now for the end of the paving season. So you might see that pick up.
Okay, I noticed,
Hopefully.
I went back and checked last year, and like El Paso County was 10 points higher last year than they are this year.
Okay. Yeah. I think it's because they just weren't, like we hadn't been billed fast enough. There's quite a bit of time lag between the time that the work's done, it's billed to, like, say, El Paso County or one of the member governments, and then we get the invoice here to pay it. And so I think that that's mostly what it is.
So you're thinking we'll see an improvement next month?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We've had quite, like, since this came out, so this came out October 9th. So it's the same day as the board reports. So, you know, we're already in November, and we've had 2 really large accounts payable batches in that time.
As long as you're not overly concerned. Okay.
No.
Yeah, Ed?
I was told by some of the workers that work in the crews that this last May we had that light snowstorm, so everything was like a month later this year. So that might reflect in this. You know,
That
something
makes
to
sense.
consider.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And it's weird, too, we had an early snowstorm, too, so, that could not, yeah, that might not be good.
Any other
more questions?
Any other questions on the financial report? Okay, item 6A, item 6, the budget presentation.
So today we'll have the budget workshop for the CAC, and then next Wednesday, the budget workshop for the board. And in your packet is the total budget packet, and I handed out Town of Green Mountain Falls. They changed their memo, and what they did is they changed the carryover for Belvedere. They thought, I think it's less in my packet. If in the end they don't spend all the Belvedere money, they're going to do a line item transfer to the Stilling Basins project. So that's the situation there. But let me just do the overview. It starts on page 4. And page 4 is a calculation that determines the allocations to the member governments. So we estimated sales and use taxes of $102 million. And we had $100 million this year. We knew that was lower. I asked the board for direction here because, as you know, we need to pay back Cdot with any overages over budget. And they wanted to increase the budget to $102 million for next year, for 2020. The estimated interest, I estimated at $2 million. And then we have the sales and use tax collection costs, and those are paid to Cdot. That should be a little high at $270 there. I estimate high on those expenditures. The administrative estimate costs $766,000, and that is capped at 1%, but this is at about 0.71%. So we're still below the threshold there. And then the reserve adjustment comes off of the total, and that's at $280,000. And the reserve is 10% of revenues, and I bring in the difference each year from what the balance is today and what it should be based on the new numbers. So the difference there was $280,000. And then transit gets 10%, so numbers 7, 8, and 9, maintenance 35%, and capital 55%. And then it just adds up to that number 6 line that is the allocation line. Maintenance allocations are based on the decennial census percentage. Capital allocations are very close to that. I don't know if you remember, but way back in 2012, if you were here, the member governments came up with their lists and they estimated their costs, and then it was supposed to come close to their allocation, maintenance allocation. So that's the allocation that I use. Then transit, the 10% plus their transit fare box revenue and other revenue, which is advertising, is $3,600,000, almost $91,000. So pages 5, 6, and 7 then is an income statement, and the first column has the estimated 2019 carryover. Each of the member governments supply that, and then at the mid-year budget amendment, after the audit, we go in and put the actual carryovers in there. So then the draft budget is the next column. Line item transfers, there's none so far, but there, I'll be using this format next year, so there will be some. And that's the financial statement. 8, 9, and 10 compare in financial statement format, income statement format, the 2019 budget to the 2020 budget. As you can see, the revenues are real similar, and then the allocations just, allocate those numbers in the same fashion as I did on page 4. So then starting on page 11 is the transit budget, and Lan is going to come up and talk about the transit budget.
Can I ask?
Sure.
The revenue projection, I don't know if it will affect RTA as much as like Cowhand, but with the new point of sale, sales tax, I would have thought you would go higher because we saw a big jump in July.
Well, one of the things that that could be part of our jump but when I talked to the Colorado Department of Revenue people, we had already been, they explained it to me the way we do our use taxes. We had already seen a lot of that,
Okay. So it's not
which
as-
they said, so for us, it shouldn't make as big of a difference, but I think we are seeing a jump.
That's what I thought too.
But if we exceed the budget by enough, we can get Cdot paid off for the I-25 gap project.
Where do we account for the Cdot payment in here?
Okay, so you won't see it because it'll be based on revenue over budget. So you won't see it in this financial statement because it won't happen till next year. And we don't accrue it because we don't know the number till next year. But in our financial statements, let me get back to that. I can point it out because this is a good example of something that comes in after the year end. So on page 4 of the financial statement memo, up at the top, it says I-25, State Highway 105 North County Line Road contribution. And I make an adjustment at the mid-year budget amendment and bring it in there because it's based on the prior year's revenue over budget. So that's kind of how it happened this year. And when we started this, I thought, I wonder if I should estimate it. So I asked our auditors what they recommended. And they recommended not putting it in the original budget because then you have to have a zero budget. And how do you do that if it's supposed to be with revenue that's going to exceed budget? Just put it in the mid-year budget amendment.
Go ahead, Larry.
On page 4, item number 5, you have add, subtract, reserve, adjustment. Do you maintain a reserve? Do you maintain reserve
Yes.
an account?
Let's go to page 36.
Well, and as a follow-on, why would you be taking money out of the reserve?
Well, here I'm taking money out of the revenue to put in the reserve on this page 4, because I'm subtracting it from the revenue because the estimated income is going up. And then on page 36 is our reserve balance. So it just gives the totals, but last year's reserve balance was the amount that was less by the amount that I have, the $280,000.
Okay.
Tony?
So going back to the I-25 gap revenue over budget thing, some economists, and it's probably about a half and half, I'm hearing, are saying that we're possibly looking at a slowdown this coming year. If that happens, then we hit, a couple of years of, minor recession or something of the sort. Where do we stand on paying off Cdot, and do we have to just look into the future and keep telling them we're going to send them money?
Our intergovernmental, we changed how many years we have to do this, so you might remember that. So we have a lot longer to repay it. But one of the ways to get it paid off is to lower the budget. It's a game, but that is one way to do it. Now let's hope that this won't be an issue and we'll be able to pay them this year. So, but if we really hit a slowdown like we did the last time we had that slowdown, it'll be significant, yeah. So.
David?
So, given that, then, if I look at how how the city of Colorado Springs exploded in population in the last couple of years. I mean, I look at 2%, I'm like, really? That's it? But if we're doing that, pay off Cdot faster, I don't know that I really want to work the numbers out. I have the numbers out front. And if we're going to have a budget, maybe if we can what will come up with it, I just find 2% awful low.
It is, except that everybody thinks that we'll have a slowdown after the election. Not everybody, some people, are
Well,
guessing that.
It's always a crystal ball, but.
Right.
The fact is, up north it exploded.
Yeah.
I just can't see 2%. I really don't know the numbers for chaos.
Yeah. One of the things that we have happening too is last year we had those huge storms, the hailstorms. And that brought in a lot of sales and use tax starting in the month of September for vehicles, roofs, all sorts of stuff, right? We have not seen the September figure compared to last September. So September and the rest of the year. So I'll be curious to know if we see kind of a slowdown because we don't have those vehicle sales and that sort of thing.
But I think along that line of conversation, I think when Bev was talking to the board a couple of months ago and talking about the projections and the possibility of a potential slowdown, they decided not to raise this year's budget more than the 2% above. So even though we may be able to, we could always do it at the mid-year adjustment versus doing it now and then find ourselves having to cut back. So they were being conservative up front at the beginning, knowing that they could add at the end. So I think that was around the board discussion, the genesis of the board discussion. So those thoughts did come up.
And you can't, for a government, you can't spend more than your budget. So if we had a real drop-off in sales and use tax, I mean, you can, but we would get a very bad audit here. We would get, where we're not in compliance. And we don't ever want to have that. This is a pretty straightforward, single mission government. And so you got to kind of keep things straightforward and transparent and clean so that you don't have a negative income, which you can't have, you're not supposed to have, then that would create a lot of problems for us when we go out if we go out for the next capital 10 years.
I just wanted to follow up on that. First of all, I really appreciate you saying that. I wish someone would tell Congress.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't speaking of the federal government.
Right. The one thing that I wonder if we're doing is are we being conservative because of potential slowdown makes sense, but if we're being conservative because of the Cdot money, then it was supposed to be revenue over budget. If we're cutting our budget back to make more revenue over budget, that seems like it's not what was sold to the voters. If that's what we're doing, and because you said if it does slow down, we could always cut our budget back to make more money for them. If that's the direction we're talking about going.
in future years.
Yeah, I know.
Not this year.
I understand, but I want to say that really is not, I think, what the voters expected out of us when we put that out to them. So.
Okay.
Carlos?
Yeah, just to follow up on the slowdown theory, we really don't know what's going to happen there. But
Right.
Just explain again the function or purpose of the reserve. Isn't it intended to kind of smooth out some of these fluctuations that we may have if there is a small drop-off? The reserve will help mitigate that under budget, or if we don't get the revenue that we needed. Is that its function?
Yes, and so the Tabor Reserve, we really can't do anything with that, and that's 3%. But the 7% So the $7,261,000 then divided up into transit maintenance and capital can be utilized for projects that are either, like if in the middle of the year there's a project that's way over and they can't come out of it, get the money from a line item transfer, say in a capital one, they can go to the board, the member governments can go to the board and borrow against the reserve in that category. So capital for capital, maintenance for maintenance. Now, in prior years, we had, I think it was the Nevada Bridge. If you've been over that bridge, it was really rickety and it had to be redone, and it wasn't scheduled to be redone. And so it was done out of reserves, a lot of it, or, and then paid back to reserves and from the next year's budget.
Now, I understand if there's an emergency request because a project either was unexpected and we had to go or over budget as far as the implementation or construction or whatever. What I'm talking about is a drop in revenue, on the revenue side. I'm not talking about the expense. So, again, it goes back to the function of the reserve. The reserve is also intended to help us mitigate the effects of a drop in revenue, and also, it sounds like what you just said, an unexpected expense that then would be some type of borrowing or a loan, and so the idea was you pay it back.
Right.
Would that be the same for the expenses as well, or would we just try to see if we can bring up our
like if
reserve back
we
up
needed to take some of the board-designated reserve one year because our revenue was so low, the next year we would try to pay some of it back out of the next year's revenue, just to kind of keep it.
And required by the Tabor to do the 3% plus also the board-designated reserve as well.
Right.
All right.
And see, we really probably wouldn't borrow against Tabor because the limitations are so great as to what justifies a reason to borrow the Tabor reserves. And especially since we have the 7%, we haven't had any issues there. So.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Everybody ready for transit? Right.
Page 11.
Good afternoon. I'm not Lan Rao. I'm Craig Blewett. I'm the Transit Services Manager for the City of Colorado Springs, and in that capacity, I serve as the Director of Mountain Metro Transit. So we have a budget presentation in here somewhere. Pardon? Yeah, if you would, that would be great. So I did bring help today as well. So Lan Rao is here. Lan is our business administrator. Kelly Frazier is also here. Kelly is our senior financial analyst. And you know Brian Vituli very well, and Brian is our planning supervisor. So if you ask me any questions that are about more than an inch and a half deep, I'll probably call on my help to answer those questions. Thank you. So this is our presentation of our PPRTA budget. Just a couple of things just to bring us into context, I guess. These are the services that we provide. So we provide a fixed route bus service, 7 days a week, 362 days a year. This next year will be 363 days because it's a leap year. We provided more than 3 million trips this past year. We also do our ADA paratransit service, which is required by the federal ADA law, that anyone within 3/4 of a mile of our bus route system would be given up to a door-to-door service if because of a disability they cannot use our fixed route service. And then finally, Metro Rides is our van pool program, lots of van pools going up to Denver and elsewhere in the state. And we also have a car pool, school pool programs, matching programs, and a bicycle encouragement program as well. In the city's budget process, we submitted a number of service improvements for consideration of that process. Well, the first one is actually, I don't know if you can read it from there, but it says unavoidable contract increases. So we have multi-year contracts with our service providers. We contract out the service for fixed route and paratransit and our fleet maintenance as well. They're multi-year contracts, and they have the ability to grow in cost based on inflation or up to a maximum of 3%. So just to keep our existing services going next year, it's an additional cost of $279,000. And then the other other projects on the list, one is the continuation of the PPCC Pikes Peak Community College bus route to the northern campus, and the continuation of that project after the 2-year demonstration period lapses. And then there's a couple of improvements to existing bus routes, and then we also submitted the potential for a bus to the airport as well as a downtown shuttle. Out of that process, some headlines. So from the City General Fund, the mayor's proposed budget includes that $279,000 to continue existing services. It also includes $151,000 for contributions to our bus lift replacement project and also the downtown transit center project. On the PPRTA side is a 2.5% increase in revenue compared to 2019, and we're also proposing a transition of the human service provider program to PPACG or Cdot, hopefully PPACG, and that's the services provided by nonprofit agencies such as Silver Key, Fountain Valley Senior Center, Community Intersections, and Invita. I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. So looking at our total budget, this is on the revenue side. This is where our funding comes from. Our biggest revenue source is PPRTA, 40% of our revenues. The other three sources are City General Fund at almost $9 million, federal grants at about $5 million, and fair and advertising at $3.7 million. The majority of that money is fair revenue from our riders. On the expenditure side, about 2/3 of the budget goes to support our fixed route system. That is about 94% of our ridership, so that's the foundation of our transit system. Also, other expenditures: ADA paratransit, about $6.2 million. Specialized transportation, that's the human service provider I was mentioning, at about $788,000. Van pool program, $500,000. And administration, that includes staff, utility costs, and those kinds of things. On the capital side, so that the operating budget is about almost $26 million. On the capital side, the capital budget varies from year to year. It kind of fluctuates, and it's really based on when expenditures will actually occur. And 2020 is higher than past years because we'll be making major progress on and expending money on two large projects: our bus replacement storage facility, our bus storage facility, and also our new downtown transit center. So we'll be spending down on those capital grants this next year. Now, this is a slide that we've shown year to year, and what it does is it shows revenue in relation to expenditures and the status of our operating reserve. So in this slide, the blue line is revenue, the orange line is expenditures, the gray line at the bottom is our target reserve, and the green line is where we are with that reserve. So this is something that we do monitor on a continuing basis. We can see signs, negative signs coming, and we can adjust our service to make that correction. The target reserve is 17%. This is the key slide. This is actually our proposed budget. So it was all kind of build up to this point. But what this chart shows is a comparison of the original 2019 PPRTA budget to the proposed 2020 PPRTA budget. The column on the far right shows the differences. So there are some changes to highlight. On the revenue side, there is an $85,000 drop in fair revenue in the 2020 budget. $10,000 of the $85,000 is reduced projection of human service provider revenue, and that's based on actual performance in 2019. So we adjusted the 2020 to be lower. And the balance of that $85,000, $75,000, is really just an accounting reporting change driven by the FTA and how we report finances and ridership. There's a $610,000 increase in prior year carryover, and this is to our operating reserve. And there's an increase in grant match for obligated projects that's really just tied to our larger capital budget in this coming year. On the expenditure side, there's a $3.3 million decrease in grant match expenditure. Transit will, so if we are successful with competitive grants, discretionary grants, we will come back and adjust our budget to account for that, make sure we can match those, any additional grant funds. On the operating expenditure, the increases in fixed route and ADA service is due to higher contract rates and the new service that was added during 2019, so that partially shows up in 2019 and fully shows up in 2020. Any questions on this slide before I move on? Because again, this is the key slide of what we're asking for your support. Oops. On the specialized transportation services, we are proposing to transition administration of the HSP program from us in the City of Colorado Springs to PPACG. There is a note in the budget that we've submitted that says, so the idea is to make that continue or finalize that transition by the middle of the year, by the end of June. And so if there's any, and we're looking to fund it in a different way. So currently it's funded through city funds and PPRTA funds, about $400,000 each to make $800,000. We're proposing to instead make federal funding available. I have another slide on that. But what we're looking at, so once that transition occurs, if there's a balance of funds, PPRTA funds that haven't been spent yet, those funds would be redirected to other city-sponsored transit activities. To fund the HSP operations, again, we're proposing to use a different funding source, which is from the federal government, FTA 5310 funds. And that grant fund is really intended for this kind of service, is for enhanced mobility of seniors and individuals with disabilities. And there's a certain amount of funding that we get to our area because we're a city, an urbanized area. There's a $1.4 million balance in that fund currently that would be available to support the program, and it gets additional revenue of between $450,000 and $500,000 a year. So it's really a great fit.
Now, that 5310 money is also used by the service providers for vehicle upgrades and other kind of stuff as well, too, right?
It has been in the past, but not recently, yes.
Okay, because I sat on that at one time. So your slide mentioned Cdot, and you just kind of stopped at PPACG. Cdot's going to manage local human service providers potentially?
Well, up until about 5 years ago, Cdot was the entity that was managing those funds. So with the passage of the FAST Act, that enabled other entities to manage those funds. It was decided then that Mountain Metro Transit would be the direct recipient of those funds, but that can change. So next slide, just if I may just continue for a second, see if I can address any of your questions. Why are we doing it? So we think there's two reasons. One, it's a better fit. That's how they do it in Denver. RTD does traditional transit, and Dr. Cog, the Denver Regional Council of Governments, manages the 5310 funds with the nonprofits there. So similar to Denver, it would allow us to focus on traditional transit, fixed route, complementary ADA, and we're also exploring additional service for first mile, last mile travel to our transit system. And the second reason is that then if it went to PPACG, all the human service provider funds would go through one entity. Currently, 55% of that money goes through PPACG, through the AAA program, Older Americans Act funding, and we do about 45% of it. So by having PPACG be the sole administrator, it really goes through one agency. And that would then enable them to really get a complete picture of the rides that are being provided and the rides that are not. And so we think there's a big advantage there. And then why the 5310 funding? It is consistent with the purpose of that funding program. It does allow PPACG or Cdot to be the designated recipients, so they receive those funds directly to manage them. And as I said, the HSPs have been receiving about $800,000 a year for operations. The PPRTA funding will be used for the first half of 2020, and then starting the second half, it would use 5310 funds and going forward. Question?
I'm going to try. You'll have to forgive the voice. What happens if the sky falls and the federal government all of a sudden comes to fiscal responsibility and decides that a lot of these programs are better served or better handled at the local and state level as they were originally should have been? and this 5310 funding goes away, is there a backup plan to, would it fall back on Metro and PPRTA? Is that kind of the fallback?
Sure, that's a good question. I don't know if I'll repeat it just for everyone's benefit. So the question was, if the federal funding goes away, is there a backup plan to fund it locally? Well, it's been our experience, actually, that the federal funding is more reliable than local funding. The local funding is heavily reliant on sales tax. And so if there's a change in the economy, we really feel it, right? The federal government has been more consistent, so when we went through the last recession, the federal funding was stable, local funding wasn't. But yes, we would. If the federal funding were to dry up, we would re-huddle and decide how we can best address that. Okay? So there are three main ways to determine how well your transit service is meeting community needs. Geographic coverage, how much of the area are we serving? Frequency, how often the buses come along, and span, the days of the week and hours of the day that we provide service. So we provided all that information. So really, looking at geographic coverage, how far will people want to walk to take the bus? A quarter mile is real convenient, half mile is semi-convenient, 3/4 of a mile is about a 15, 20-minute walk, depending on how many streets you have to cross. So we do about 2/3 of the urbanized area, defined with density, is served by fixed route transit and ADA transit today. Our frequency, we're about half of our routes run every 60 minutes, and about half run 30 minutes or better. And I have a couple maps that illustrate that. And span, we do operate 362 days a year, which is an improvement over the last 9 years. All of our routes run during the weekday, 6:15 to 6:45. 13 of our routes go into the evening. 21 routes run on Saturdays, and 12 routes run on Sundays.
Can I add?
Sure. No problem.
Can I ask again, how many of those routes go beyond the geographic boundaries of Colorado Springs, the city of?
I'll have a map coming up, and I'll point those out. That's not the map, but that is a map. That's not the one I'm talking about. So this really just compares where we were sort of in the depths of the recession. If you recall, transit was really hit hard by the budget cuts during the Great Recession. We cut our fixed route service in half. We've been able to restore most of that service back. So it's taken us time, but we've gotten that back. In terms of routes that run better than 30 minutes or better, we went from 5 routes to 15. We had 0 routes in the evenings on weekends, and we only ran 255 days a year back in 2010. We're back up to every day but Christmas, Thanksgiving, and New Year's Day. Oops. So just getting closer on a route, on a map, I'll describe it more fully, but in terms of as far north as we go up to the Rampart campus of Pikes Peak Community College on the north, as well as the Memorial Hospital and Children's Hospital up there at Briargate and Union. As far east as the Tut Corridor, east of Powers. As far west as Manitou Springs, and as far south as Security Widefield. So getting into the maps, yes.
On those, the PPCC and the Memorial, am I correct in understanding that once they leave the transfer station on the north at Voyager and Union, there are no stops other than they don't, so there's not a normal bus route, it's just kind of an express bus to that place, is that right?
That's correct, for both of those locations, yes.
Maybe that's for a discussion another time of why, but go ahead.
I'll answer real quickly because it's a quick answer. So there are pilot projects, demonstration projects to see if they can demonstrate success. With regard to, well, really, I guess on both of them, the intention is to really serve those markets and so get people up there quickly. If it's stopping a lot, it's not going to get there as quickly. But secondly, if we do a regular bus route, we're required to provide ADA service as well. And since it's a demonstration project, it's really hard to put ADA service out for 2 years and then take it back. So we'd like to start with fixed routes, see how that goes. If it is successful, we'd like to add ADA service to it.
Thank you.
So this shows the service frequency on weekdays. So on this map, the least frequent is the blue, 60 minutes. 45 minutes is green, 30 minutes is yellow, 20 minutes is kind of an orange, and 15 minutes is red. And to highlight, I'm going to walk away from the microphone quickly. the Nevada corridor, Academy corridor, north-south, Platte Boulder, and also southeast to downtown. Those are our 4 15-minute routes. The advantage of a 15-minute bus route is you don't have to know the schedule. You just go out, go to a stop, and within 15 minutes a bus is going to arrive, and you got a 50-50 shot of arriving in 7.5 minutes. Looking then at Saturdays, the yellow are 30 minutes, and blue are 60 minutes. So it's about 2/3 30 minutes or better, which is good. And then Sundays, probably 2/3, 3/4 of our routes are 30 minutes, and the other ones are 60 minutes, but it's very limited service. Some of our key achievements this past year. Let me catch up with my notes. We did provide the over $3 million passenger trips. We increased our van pool fare box recovery ratio to 56%, meaning of the total cost of the van pool program, over half is provided by the participants, the riders in that program. We continued our partnership with universities and hospitals. So with the hospitals, we actually have a corporate sponsorship. We gained $68,000 a year through their commitment to brand wrap the buses and call that service the Care Connection, which is awesome. We did complete our 3 to 5 year strategic business plan. We had 3 audits this year with 0 findings, and for those who are subjected to audits, that's a really good thing. So I do want to spend a little time. We had our major 3-year FTA audit. What the FTA does as a philosophy is they tell us what the rules are, they let us spend money, and then after 3 years they check to make sure that we followed all the rules. It's an exhaustive process. There's probably 1,800 rules that they go through. We submitted 700 pages, something like that, of information to the FTA as part of that audit, and we had 0 zilch findings, so we're real proud of that. Capital projects, our Transit Master is a new, basically, software program, operating system for Mountain Metro, and we upgraded to that. Our bus storage facility is a major facility. Van pool system upgrade as well. And we also won 2, CASTA. CASTA is a statewide transit organization. We won 2 of their awards, including Large Community Transit Agency of the Year. So we're proud of those as well. Initiatives coming up this next year. More progress in the bus storage facility. I think we want to put that out for construction bid in May. Downtown Transit Center. We're on the cusp of making an announcement on that, on the location of that. We have a location. I can't announce it yet, but we will soon. Our electric bus pilot program, I think we told you we've gotten funding to allow us to buy 3 battery electric buses. Our 2045 regional transit plan is huge and will guide our future services. And North Nevada plan is looking at good connection between downtown and UCCS and along that redevelopment corridor along Nevada between Fillmore and Garden of the Gods. Alternative transit service analysis, looking at effective ways to plug into our system with first mile and last mile, as well as dealing with some of our lower productivity routes. Contract and program oversight is huge for us. 91% of our funds are outsourced. How we manage those contracts is key. Our fare study implementation, including mobile ticketing, and then human service program transition. Our ITS information technology system improvements, implementation, variable message signs we're working on, also that fare collection with mobile ticketing, and the federal mandate program. So Title VI is equity and disadvantaged business enterprise. Yeah. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Could I possibly ask about one of the initiatives?
Sure.
Colorado Springs is, well, at last look, was about 200 square miles.
Yes.
And growing, because they keep annexing. The electric buses that I've seen being tested and used elsewhere have mileage limitations. How do you foresee that program? I mean, are we receiving a grant, I'm assuming, from somewhere that's paying for this, so that when, I'm not going to assume it's going to fail, but when it doesn't live up to expectations, the taxpayers aren't out money for it?
Sure. So our battery electric bus program is really a demonstration project at this point in time. We're getting a limited number of buses. We're shooting for 4. We currently have funding for 3. The funding we got is from the settlement with Volkswagen. And that was managed by the state. And what it does is it provides the difference in cost between a diesel-powered bus and a battery electric bus, plus 10% and plus charging equipment. So we've gotten that for 3 with delivery expected in year 2021, so still a couple of years yet. And our new bus storage facility will be built to accommodate that as well. So what happens if it goes wrong? And they do have limited range. So we're being very careful in how we go forward. We're asking a lot of questions of bus manufacturers. We've identified routes that could work with battery electric buses in terms of the mileage of that route. So we are selecting those and looking at topography and the other things. There's a lot of factors that kind of go into it that we're learning more and more. The more often you open the doors, the more you have to heat or cool your bus, which takes electricity, and there's a lot of factors. But we're going to make sure that we're cautious in how we step forward, and we're limiting our risk by the number of buses we're getting.
Craig, in your outline, associated with that specialized transit was the call center.
Yes.
So is that going away, or are you just transferring it? Because, I mean, it was many, many years and a lot of effort to put it together. So is it just not working, or is it all right to give an update on that?
Sure. I'll start with a shorter answer and see if you have more questions. So the call center, it's been a recommendation of, I think, 3 PPACG regional plans in a row to develop a one-call, one-click reservation system for people using those services to get the best ride. So currently there are 4 providers: Invita, Silver Key, Fountain Valley Senior Center, and Community Intersections. Prior to that service being available, customers would call any of the 4 to get a ride. And they might call Invita first for a 10 o'clock in the morning ride, not available. Call Silver Key for a ride, not available. Call Fountain Valley Senior Center, they got a ride. Unfortunately, the data comes back that there were 3 rides requested. 2 of them were denied, and 1 was provided, when in reality there was 1 ride requested, and it was provided, right? Also, in terms of optimizing, because they're running independently, you're not getting the most riders optimally. So that was really the purpose of the call center. Been working at it, I think, as a region for probably 6 or 7 or 8 years. First, the Group ACT, which was those 4 HSPs getting together trying to make that happen. And they got a grant to make that happen, but weren't able to do that. PPACG then tried, and then Mountain Metro tried. And we were able to stand up the call center this past couple of years. It has not been the success that we had hoped for. In part, only half the rides, less than half the rides go through the call center. So it's hard to optimize if you're only dealing with half the volume, right? And there's also differences in software, which has been a challenge to overcome. At this point in time, it looks like we're going to be going away from that, but we're still in discussions about how the best way to do that.
Thank you. Rick?
Just 2 quick things. One, could you maybe pick up a tendency that the federal Congress has and leak the transit center address?
Delete it?
Leak it.
Leak it. Oh. No, I can't.
The other thing on this electric bus and diesel, I was looking through here and I was stunned by how little the fixed transits use in fuel for a year. I mean, last year you had a $80,000 carryover. Can you justify electric buses with as economic that these days are running?
Well, it's a good question. And, we've done analysis in terms of the cost of operations of diesel versus electric. Diesel prices have been low for the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. The question is, can we predict what prices are going to be 10 years from now when we still have the buses? And we looked at compressed natural gas a few years ago, and we thought with all the changes, after 12 years, we could be $700,000 in the black. But if you change the prices to what they were 3 years later, all of a sudden it was the other way around, right? And so it's hard to judge what long-term energy prices are going to be. I think with electricity, there are monetary benefits and there are non-monetary benefits, right? And one of the things we're hoping from electric buses, and there's not a lot of demonstration yet. That's why we're looking for proof of concept. But electric motors have a lot fewer moving parts than a diesel engine. So they're expected to be cheaper to maintain, and that could help with costs as well. And then there's non-monetary benefits. There's zero emissions out of the tailpipe. Obviously, if you're burning coal for your electricity, you are doing some emissions. But I think, as you know, CSU is aggressively looking for more sustainable non-carbon sources for fuel. So all those things in common, it's part of it's monetary, part of it's non-monetary. That's probably more of an answer than you were looking for.
No, that's okay. And also, how will the electric buses be effective on hills like Fillmore?
Yeah.
And do they have to stop at the top to cool off and,
Yeah.
and recharge the battery, have a recharging station at the top?
So, great question. So there's a lot to the analysis for battery electric buses. Two things on that. There are two styles of buses. One is where you do the overnight charging, and the other one is when you do stop and you charge en route. So you might have a hold overtime at the downtown transit center, the new downtown transit center for 15 minutes. You can boost. We're looking for the overnight charge and to make that sustain, and there's a lot going into that. I will say, in the ability to climb hills, they're actually really good. The Pikes Peak Hill climb, I think, has been won the last several years by electric vehicles. So they can do really well performance-wise. We've had 2 or 3 demonstration buses out so far for us that we've been able to go out and ride on, which has been great, and we take them up Fillmore Hill or something equal. So we've been putting it to the test. And we're also looking to, as part of our procurement process, who else have you sold buses to? Can we talk to them as well, right? So we're trying to do our homework. There's really a lot going into it. It's different training for drivers. It's different training for maintenance workers. The way you drive an electric bus, you don't want to drive it the way you do diesel. You'll draw it down too fast. And so there's a lot of stuff into that. Luckily, we have 2 years to figure that all out. And our attitude on that, there are a lot of questions about battery electric buses, but we are going to give it a go. We're going to be cautious, make sure we have our risk covered. We may hold on to an extra bus or two during that time, just in case there are issues, that we're able to provide the service. But we're committed to giving it a go.
Sure.
Craig, in the materials that we received, there is no mention of the bus storage facility, the downtown transit center. Can you talk a little bit about, is this a capital expenditure, and how much is each, and what it consists of?
Sure. So yeah, they are capital projects. They're our biggest capital projects. That, along with, I think, when we showed the, let me see if I can, back to our expenditures.
Right. No, we didn't get that, so in
Okay.
our packet. So
Yeah,
that's what.
you're going to get it, I think, after the fact. Sorry about that. I probably could have got that to you. So on the expenditure side, for this next year, 2/3 of the money is going towards facilities, so dominated by those two big projects, bus storage facility and downtown transit center. Rolling stock, that's our bus replacement, is about 22%, and IT systems about 12%. So on the facility side, the bus storage replacement, currently we have a canopy and outdoor bus storage. That's worked okay. It hasn't been ideal. So we spend some time in cold weather warming up buses in the morning, and kind of waste some fuel doing that, and also use human resource time as well. So the new bus storage facility will be fully enclosed. It'll accommodate, I think it's 72 buses in that neighborhood, and also will accommodate electric. So some of the electric we're installing at the beginning, because we know we have 3 or 4 buses. Some of we're just putting conduit in to make it easy to add more chargers later. It's about an $11 million project, which is significant, but it's a huge project for us. It's really going to pay dividends. Currently, we don't have enough space for the buses we have. Our current space accommodates 48 buses, and we have 61. So what that means is you're required for clean water to have dripping buses go through into a drain trap, right, to filter it. We can't do that, so we're actually outside that area, so we have to do visual inspections and make sure that there aren't any drainage that we have to clean it up. It hasn't been workable, and being outside, like I said, causes issues. So it's a really important project for us, and we've been working on it for a long time. We, again, are in the design phase at this point, expect to put it out to bid in May. The downtown transit center, it really depends on what we do and how we do it. Currently, that range would be between $12 and $20 million for a new downtown transit center. And we'll be narrowing that down with our site selection and going forward in terms of how we're going to pursue that.
And those two capital projects are going to be funded by PPRTA funds?
Some of the matching funds is provided by PPRTA, yes. The 80% is funded by the Federal Transit Administration. We're also seeking state funding for our downtown transit center as well.
Thank you.
In your storage facility, are you putting a wash facility in there also, an automated one?
Yeah, we actually already have one as part of our maintenance facility. So the way that works is buses come back from their service, then they're cleaned inside and out, and we do have a bus wash as part of that currently. And then they go to the bus storage facility overnight.
The new facility for the buses to handle the number of buses and all, is going to be totally new?
Yes.
And replacing the existing?
Yes.
Is it going to require more property, or are you going to have to do property acquisition? I have no idea where, I know where it is, but
Okay.
I've never looked at it. Oh, well, hey, this is 2 buses, this is 42 buses. I have no idea.
So if you're on Transit Drive, we're primarily on the left side of the road, the east side of the road. Down at the bottom of Transit Drive on the west side of the road was property that was used by operations and maintenance for the city streets. And we've worked with city streets where we are taking that property over. In last year's city general fund budget, we had funded $400,000 to make sure the streets could relocate to another facility.
So the property is okay?
The property's good. It's city-owned property. We're repurposing it.
Any other questions?
I had to give credit to operations and maintenance for that. So, thanks, Corey.
Any other questions for Greg on transit? David?
Electric buses, just out of curiosity, how long will a battery last? How much will it cost?
So, they're expected to last 6 years, and they'll be warranted for 6 years, which is about half the minimum life of a bus. So the minimum life of a bus to FTA is 12 years. We try to get a few more years out of it than that. Batteries last about half of it. I think I heard yesterday from the group we talked to yesterday, which was Proterra, that it was $200,000, I think, to replace batteries. Was that right? Did anybody else at that meeting? About $200,000. There's 4 banks of batteries, $50,000 each.
Just for clarity, the type of battery?
The type of battery is, well, I think it depends on the manufacturer. So Proterra was lithium ion.
All right, any other questions for Greg? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Very informative.
Thank you.
All right, so city, Mike, got your vest on?
Nice.
Whoa. Good afternoon, Mike Chavez, City Engineering. I don't have a slideshow. We'll just go through the memos. So if you turn to page 14, the city's capital, the city's portion of the budget is we've got $40 million in capital budgeted for 2020 and $25.4 million for maintenance, and then the transit's 10.6. Then the next table basically shows the projects that we are either working on or will start to work on in 2020. We show the carryover and then the combined budget for the 2019 and 2020 budget years. And we've got a long list of projects going on. In 2020, we're not going to have a whole lot of construction. Our biggest projects are going to be in construction are going to be the Barnes Road widening, the Platte Avenue Bridge over Sand Creek, and the Royer Crossing down off of Las Vegas. Those are the bigger ones. We have a lot of traffic projects going on, but those are the big ones. And then in 2021 and 22 is where we're going to have a lot of big projects hit the street. And so all that to say is that we do show a large carryover in budget at the bottom of the A list through 2020, but that'll start getting spent down in this year, coming year, and then really in 21 and 22, it's going to really drain these funds down quite a bit. Are there any questions on those projects?
Rick?
I don't know. Oh, there we go. I don't know if this is the right place. The Tut extension up to, what is that, Vicky Lane?
Templeton Gap.
To Templeton Gap? What's the holdup on that project? That is, you're talking about the Peterson Road and Dublin being a mess. That's nothing compared to this thing.
So what we have is we did the first half of the extension from Dublin to Vicky Lane. The rest of the way to connect back into the T-Gap Road, we are going through, there's a pretty good-sized property that we're almost bisecting it. And we don't want to buy that right away because it'll use up all the allocated, most of the funds we have for construction. So we're waiting for that property to annex in the city, and then they would dedicate the right of way. And it's gone back and forth. I've heard, different, not stories, but, different people have, decided they wanted to go and try to annex, then they've held up. So that project's kind of on hold. We're hoping it'll go soon, but that's what we're waiting on.
Do you have a kind of prioritized to where as soon as it gets freed up, you'll move on it?
Yes, we actually have a design. It's not final, but it's pretty much done. And the money's sitting we have money sitting there. So as soon as it gets in the city and it's dedicated, we'll build it. We'll see at the time if we need a little bit more money, but we have money there to try to get it going.
Thank you.
I've got a question. Cheryl, go ahead.
Just a quick question on the Colorado Avenue project. Your intent then is to pay back the county the $7 million next year?
We're paying them $1 million in 2020, and then probably in 2021 we'll have to do the rest, or kind of depend. If they need the money, we'll work it out. Or
well, it just shows $1 million paying in 2020.
Yeah, we owe them $6 million, and so if we pay them $1 million in 2020, then we'll owe them $5 million.
Okay.
Carlos?
Yeah, I apologize. I'm not sure where we are in the budget, in the presentation, but I was on 23. I just had a question about the Pikes Peak Greenway corridor improvements. Are we that far ahead, or are we? I just missed where we are bookmarked in our.
Well, we just went through the list that goes up through page 17, but.
You want to just wait?
But no, I mean we can.
I can wait. I'm sorry. I apologize. I got lost.
No, I mean this is just the list, and then the description.
Then the details. Yeah. Well, I just have my question then. I know we were asking for $1.2 million for the Pikes Peak Greenway corridor improvements. I know some of that money, a lot of that money is going to be going to the pedestrian bridge, and I didn't see that there. The second question, I just didn't know if this was a typo or not, but the construction in 2019, this year, various portions of the Pikes Peak Greenway itself, the trail, okay, not the pedestrian bridge. There were several projects named in there. I didn't know. Are those projects starting, or do you happen to know, or should we follow with Parks on?
No.
Schedule?
So basically, what I'm asking for is the 1.2 for the Greenway pretty much makes them whole on their original allocation that was for the trail and not the bridge. So what Parks is looking at is they are looking at. They're going to need this money, but
the 1.2 for the trail itself.
Yeah, so they would do the I-25 Rock Rimmon to Cottonwood Creek Trail.
Are they starting this year?
No, I think. They are waiting on the grant. That's really going to be matched for the TE grant and construction management services, and then the Mesa Creek Crossing and the Fontanel Trailhead. Those sections they're looking at doing next year.
Okay. That's why I thought it seemed wow, we're starting, and this is good news. I'm hoping I'm familiar with those trail crossings and where those are at. This would be great to do that. I also know there's some PPRTA 1 funds that we still have that $41,000 from the capital, back from the first initial. I know that's going to include that, but I was just questioning the construction note there, construction in 2019. That's not correct. Some of it is, some of it is.
Well, I think they were hoping to, but it's going to be more, they'll start in 2020, but they've got plans ready, and I think they're, and I'll update the board, but I think they're just trying to get that out to bid, and then they'll start.
So we're looking at spring, perhaps,
Yeah,
maybe? All right, thank you.
Mike, I got a couple of questions. Some of them are just clarity. So on Academy Boulevard, both of those, and on the Circle Drive Bridge rehab, the money in the 2020 is primarily focused on design, and am I reading the descriptions right? We're really not planning on starting construction until 21?
Yes.
Okay. In your descriptions on page 21 for Emergency Bridge Fund, it looks like the last sentence, it just ends like the planned work is supplementing Cheyenne Canyon Bridge and a period, like.
No. That was on what, 21?
Page 21 for Emergency Bridge Fund.
Oh.
So I didn't know whether you.
I think it was the end period is extra. I think we're looking at using some of that to supplement the Cheyenne Canyon Bridge.
Okay. My other questions are on further back on the program funds. So. Let me keep going, everybody. Okay. On the citywide roadway safety traffic ops program, you're carrying over a whole bunch of cash there, and about half of what you're planning on spending. And so, actually, it's about the same amount as $600,000 difference. But in the descriptions, you talk about the construction of traffic signals. Is that different than your citywide traffic signal upgrade? So the construction for new signals is a different line than the upgrades of existing. Is that?
Yes. So the like on this particular line item, citywide operations, they have most of the 19 money is programmed for specific projects. I think. Now, when I went through the update, I think I showed that that the BEV's report showed a lot of money there, but we internally at the city have plans for it.
Okay.
So I showed what we really thought the available, the available unaccounted for was, and it wasn't as much as what was kind of perceived. So a lot of the carryover is going to be slated for those projects which we identified, and then this extra money that I'm showing in the projects are new projects. So the reason I put the note is 2019 and 2020 funds will be used is because if you look at the combined totals in the table, it's a pretty good size chunk of money, but we actually have plans for those, and we've got designs or either done or close to done, and we'll be bidding a lot of that in 2020.
Well, kind of the reason I bring it up is just being a little sensitive to, and the citywide congestion incident management also is carrying over more than you're programming for this year. Being a little sensitive to some of the board's comments on those two programs, I would come prepared to defend those carryover money and what you plan on spending it for.
Yeah. And I may need to bring my update that I had before because, like I said, I was trying, not trying to overload the budget document.
No, I get it. I just, I believe in those programs. I see the improvement when I'm out driving around the city weekly, and I believe in them, but just I'm also sensitive to some of the board members. And then one quick question on the citywide traffic signal upgrades. One of the projects listed in there is Briargate Boulevard in Union. They just repaved that street, just up next to the Venezia Park, right? And didn't they just redo those signals there?
I will, let me see where, I'm not real sure about that.
Oh, I just...
Jim, there's a difference between Briargate Parkway and Boulevard.
Correct.
And Briargate
Boulevard is the one, I got...
where they did the new signals.
My bad.
Okay.
My bad. I know what you're talking about. Got it.
Yeah.
Yep, okay. Got it. My bad. Okay, that was all my questions. Go ahead, Tom.
Sorry.
Oh, who is it? Oh, the new guy.
Okay. I'm very new to PPRTA, and so I'm going to hopefully get some education today. I've got a number of questions, and I guess one thing is reading through the legislation. I find it difficult to understand how PPRTA has funded a number of types of projects. And with no disrespect to the city of Colorado Springs, which I love, and I'm just on the edge of it in El Paso County, I'm going to be very curious when we finally get around to determining what are capital improvements and maintenance and the difference between the two. That's one area. However, I note that Colorado Springs City is the only one that has something called programs. More critical is I seem to find a lot of projects that are not listed, at least that I could find, in what was given to the voters that are being implemented with PPRTA funds. And if I were a voter and I found that out, if I were correct, I would really be starting to raise questions. And I happen to think PPRTA is an outstanding, great organization, and I'm very pleased to be part of it. But I'll give you some examples. I see a lot of things down. I heard a couple of my fellow colleagues here asking questions about traffic signal improvements and all of that. The base of my career started in traffic engineering, and I think all of these are good projects. I also see things about bikeways and pedestrian. Neither one happened to be very high on my list. I have been in the highway business all of my life. And I don't understand how, I don't recall seeing anything of these characteristics in the legislation. And yet I know that it's been approved for years. But at least since I'm a new person, I'm coming in questioning not only the future, but the past. And I have no obligation or ties to the past. And yet all of these, I think, are probably good projects. But in addition to questioning whether they should be legitimate for the PPRTA to participate in, I would say, why in the world don't you, the city of Colorado Springs is pretty wealthy in many ways, and they're doing a great job in a lot of improvements on the roads. Why in the name of God don't you have these sort of projects in your own city budget and bring some of the roadways into PPRTA. So I know I've hit you with a series of questions, but I do need to be educated a bit here.
Okay, and I'd be willing to meet with you to kind of go over it, but I also see there's a few new people coming back. But real briefly, I'll touch on. I won't spend too much time. But basically, the city saw the need for programs even in RTA 1 because there was just a lot of changes and growth in the city, and the RTA program is 10 years long, and the needs change within the city. The east and northeast are growing like crazy, and we didn't really have a lot of projects identified. So the programs were implemented and funded to be able to address changing conditions, congestion, spot improvements at intersections if a certain part of town grows, and Peterson, Dublin, that was out in the boonies a few years ago. Now it's a log jam, so the program money is able to go in there and make some spot improvements. So we feel that the programs are valuable, and it's our intent to continue to use them and fund them. Now, the truth be known, there's been some projects or programs that have kind of been innovative or kind of controversial but the board has approved funding those. But one of the things that I and Travis Easton, the Public Works Director, have committed to is to come and talk to you about, hey, we'd like to possibly use money to do this or that, and discuss it and get a initial approval or heads up or a thumbs up or down, rather than just come with a contract that we expect you to approve. So. And I think I've even said that we still will come with some projects that some CAC and board members may not think is appropriate, but we're going to come and talk to you and ask you about it first before we assume we're going to fund it. So I think that'll help address some of those issues of we're not sure if this is a legitimate use. But the programs, I think, are very useful and are allow us flexibility to meet the request of our citizens. We got a lot of citizens calling to fix this area and this area, and if it's not an A-list project, we can't do anything but for the program money, then we can address it. As far as pedestrian and and bikeways, those are programs that were identified by the voters and approved because there is a pretty good sized component of citizens who think that transportation is bikeways and pedestrian ways and not just roads. And they have a voice too, and they voted on, and those all got approved in RTA 1 and 2.
Okay. Mr. Robertson, two quick questions. The state law, the RTA state law, and I'm abbreviating, but it simply says that you can spend RTA money on any facility or improvement that conveys people or goods. That include, and in the law, it specifically allows gondolas. So it's any facility or improvement that transfers or conveys people or goods.
And that's a very broad definition.
It is very broad. And then the second part of my answer is that the program funds, and there's about 10 of them in the PPRTA 2 ballot that the voters approved by an 80-20 margin. There are the program funds are all listed in the ballot and were voter approved by 80-20 margin.
And I'd like to add one thing is that recently, the last 2 or 3 months or so, the city has been increased our visibility of the internal workings of those program funds to the kinds of projects and things that are working on. And so I couldn't have 6 months ago, we wouldn't have been able to say that we're working on a bike a bike lane or a signal at this intersection or that intersection. And so the city has been very good about coming forward now with a fair amount of detail in terms of how they're spending that money and what they're planning to do with it. And that is, in my opinion, a big increase in terms of our role as a citizen's oversight as to what's happening within those funds. So I thank the city for doing that.
Okay.
Rev?
Nope, yeah. You're on.
Oh, I can't see the red light behind. Just to point something out, because it's been a problem for me at times. I happen to agree with Jim. It's a great program, funds are great. They're not specifically named, and I can think of one right off the top of my head. It was Research Parkway and Powers Boulevard. It was an intersection problem, and it became a real political issue like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and it was actually considered, and there have been people asking about it. And it was where it was not a named project, a capital project. It was a program. They didn't address it because at that time, and it's still in the process, it is now owned, the intersection is owned by Cdot, okay? And they are working on it, and it would have never come, so they directed the program funds to other places that are critical. I'm thinking of a story I heard earlier today of a mishap on Union and Research, or close, and I'm speaking of you. And they do address the problems that you can't foresee, and the ballot does not list all of the program files like Rick said. They are literally emergencies, so to speak, to address a problem unique to that particular intersection that wasn't noted in time to put it on the ballot. This ballot was written in 2012. And I've had a hard time getting used to it, but working with the city in the last, well, I'd say probably a year and a half, you see the value of it, really, because it's not misspent or abused. It's just not listed as you, Project A, or me, Project C. The only one I care about is the one over Circle Drive, the two bridges.
All right.
Well, I know it's a trap for me.
Any other questions for the city on their budget input?
Okay. All right, and then let me just touch real briefly on page 18. We've got RTA1 funds, the 58,000 in traffic safety operations. We're going to use that here soon. Awesome Lost Corridor in Nevada to Academy and Circle Constitution. We're going to probably just request to roll in those funds into Mark Scheffel project. The Pikes Peak Greenway, 41,000. Parks has plans for that. They're about ready to do some construction and use that for CM. And then the Mark Scheffel Bridge at Sand Creek, we have a contract on board. They're going to be starting that soon. We're just waiting on a little bit of clearing up some right-of-way issues. And the bulk of that money will be used to build that bridge. And then we should have RTA1 projects, money used up by next year.
On the Austin Bluffs corridor improvements, I don't know whether it would fall under the Nevada to Academy or that, but would road signs be part of a legitimate, if you're going westbound on Austin Bluffs, before you get to Union, there is no sign that tells you Union Boulevard is around that curve until you get right there.
Oh.
And I see people changing across lanes, suddenly realizing that that's Union because they see the sign on the exit. When they put that wall up, somehow there is no sign. And as you come around those curves, you're on that exit before you know it.
Okay. Well, that's something we can get our signs marking to do.
If that's something that you could use some of that money
Yeah,
for.
or within their current budget, we can probably get that signed.
I've sold some fairly close
Okay.
calls there, so thought that'd bring that up.
Okay.
Rick?
Just real quick, it made me think of it. Dublin at Powers Boulevard, the striping on the east side of that is very, very difficult to follow because you'll end up in a left-hand turn lane when you're wanting to go straight. And I think that restriping needs to be handled for that because there's been a number of times where I've had to all of it almost stop to get out of a turn lane into straight lane.
Okay.
So if it's on the east side of Powers at Dublin.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think I was taking my daughter learning to drive, and she got kind of caught in that same situation. So we'll have traffic look at it. Okay. And then the maintenance budget, we've got $25 million, which we split between bridge maintenance operations, streets operations, and capital project maintenance. So that's pretty much it. So any other questions?
All right. Thank you, Mike. Jennifer, you're going to do county? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Committee, Jennifer Irvin, County Engineer. I think we can kind of be brief on this and give you a good update on where we are. If you look at page 28, I'll mainly talk from the charts, and it's probably most helpful. We, as you know, still have some funding left from the original 2005 to 2014 program. No additional budget there, but we do have carryover. And so on Mark Shuffle Mesa Ridge, just briefly, we are closing out punch list, doing some water quality stuff and closing out permits. That project was substantially complete in 2017. And then Baptist Road West, we still are closing out some permits. We have some Preble's Jumping Mouse, and so that permit isn't closing until 2021, but we continue to work towards that. And then finally, money left in the Meridian Extension Project, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, but that project is under advertisement for construction right now. So closing those out. And then on the next page, 29, our capital program, we are putting the bulk of our money to two main projects, and Academy Boulevard. As you know, we have applied for a build grant in coordination with Cdot, and expect to hear back from that later this month, hopefully. And then finally, Highway 105, and continuing on with that project. Just an update on our overall projects. We had a good update here in the last month or so, but essentially as we go into 2020, either all of our projects are in some form of either completion, design, or construction. So we are getting the rest of them underway, some of them that had not been started yet. So, and very excited about that.
I note that the furthest right column for 105 has got about a $5 million reduction from the column next to it. Is there something going on there?
So what I added this year is, and we've been doing the first three columns, but what I added this year was essentially showing you what our total original budget was and what we've allocated so far to each of those projects. So we're not reducing. We anticipate in future years to add additional money to that project. So in general, what we, the county, have done has been is to only come to the board with budget increases at the time that we know that that's going to occur. So when we advertise for construction and we actually get those contracts back and those bids back, we're typically only coming to the board when we know that we definitely need a budget increase, because we are trying to be as fiscally conservative as possible. So in that case, we just have, there's Highway 105. We have two phases of that project. The first phase is under design and nearly getting ready for construction. The second phase, which is the larger phase, about 4 miles, is just in the final design phase. So anticipate we'll add more budget to that in future years. Hopefully that helps.
On the very same project, and you may have told the hack at the last meeting, when do you anticipate the completion of the Highway 105 project?
The first phase or the second phase?
The complete phase?
Well, we're hoping to get underway with construction on Phase A next year, and I think as we get closer to construction, we'll have a better time period of how long we expect that to occur. And but we haven't gone through the property acquisition for the second phase yet, so that is a critical path into getting to construction, and because, we have so many properties adjacent to that corridor, I really hate to, as we haven't even finished final design, to put a time limit on that. But I think what we're trying to do is move all of these projects along to get to construction and then completion as quickly as possible, as previously discussed.
Thank you.
Carlos?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just ask the colleague here Tom's question he's asked before. If you go through this is really a big picture question here, but the capital expenditures, if you look at BEV's financial reports, this is more the aspirational original. We're looking, so far we're about 15% spent on the projects, and there's this, I'm going to just say it's just a general concern that we're not going to be able to catch up and make significant progress on the A list by the end of PPRTA 2. That's a general concern. How would you respond to that concern?
I'm going to keep saying the same thing I have.
Keep saying it again.
We have 4 projects that we are about either in, 4 of our projects that we either have currently under ad for construction or plan to still get under contract this year. And then secondly, 2 of our other larger projects, Academy Boulevard and then Mesa Ridge Parkway, that we are doing under innovating contracting methods. So I feel good about the progress that we are making. Again, several of our projects we designed in-house, so we're not showing the expenditures up front that we typically would with some of those projects. And again, if you look at PPRTA 1 versus PPRTA 2, many of these projects are a little bit smaller and not so unwieldy or as large as some of the other projects were in the first round of PPRTA. So I feel like we're going to have all of these projects under construction by the time we at least go out to the ballot measure or completed. Or at the point where they're about ready to go to construction. Now, all the projects will not be finished construction, and that was never the goal. Our goal is to make sure that these projects go on as quickly as possible and are constructed as quickly as possible. So, if you look at one of our largest projects for the county, Academy Boulevard, we're in coordination with Cdot right now, and that Cdot has a CMGC contract about ready to be awarded. So I really feel like we, on some of these larger projects are making good progress.
Yeah, no, thank you for being a good trooper there. I'm not trying to, like I said, pick on you or anything.
No.
It's just a general concern is that, so if I understand it, just to paraphrase, we're looking at, these are fairly large projects. We'll see a big bang or fairly large. These are large projects. But the larger the project, the more lead time they require, more design time. I understand that because of the nature of these projects, you're not going to have what's called an even burn rate,
Yep.
So, if we're halfway through, we're not going to see half the money spent. So that does certainly make sense. But I'm just bringing that up because just to keep it on the front. But if there's any way that we can help to accelerate these projects, because there is a very strong desire, and I'm just going to reiterate from the board of directors, to make progress so that we can perhaps maybe even start working on B-list, which is a desire by the board, and I'm just expressing their desire. Okay?
Sure. I think that's a desire by the member governments as well. We'd like to get there. So, just to add to that, just, 2 of our larger projects, Academy Boulevard, we have a wide swath of right-of-way there. A lot of our projects take significant time to get through the right-of-way process. So we feel very confident that on Academy Boulevard, we're not having a ton of right-of-way acquisition, and same with Mesa Ridge Parkway. We have received a bunch of right-of-way from the developer already through the development process for the dedication. He built the first 2 lanes, and then we'll be building the second 2 lanes. No, the Mesa Ridge Parkway is not the build grant. It's the other larger project that we still have, quote-unquote, yet to start. Again, that project already has design plans done by a developer that are probably at what I would say about 60%. So I know we have some large projects left, but I really feel like we're going to be able to make good progress and get those underway.
I got a question. Meridian Road and the Falcon Park and Ride. With the growth that's going on out there in Falcon and Peyton in that area that's going on, is there any plans that you're aware of Cdot or the county or city doing a traffic flow study and looking at the volume of traffic coming into town on Woodman, and where are they going? Points north? Are they taking the interstate into Denver, or is there anything that that would support a more mass transit from that park and ride into town or points north that you're aware of, or any plans?
So 2 things, well, maybe 3 things. So the development of the location of the Falcon Park and Ride was based upon a study done by PPACG, El Paso County, City of Colorado Springs, knowing that the growth would be out there at some point. And so there was actually a study of and development of park and ride facilities and where those should be located. And part of that was actually also identified in the original annexation agreement for Banning Lewis Ranch. So that was the purpose for the Park and Ride. It was a planned facility that we knew that as growth occurred in El Paso County, both incorporated and unincorporated, that we needed to plan for as from a regional perspective. So that's how the Falcon Park and Ride came about. And then I guess in general, as the city and the county developed the environmental assessment for Woodman Road, we recognized that there's going to be significant development in the county out towards the Falcon area. So we, based upon the studies that were done and completed, had planned for a 4-lane roadway, and that was built in conjunction with the Woodman Road District in 2004. So essentially we went from a 2-lane roadway with no shoulders from Powers Boulevard all the way out to US 24 and built a 4-lane roadway. But when we did that, we tried to plan for the future. And so we knew that at some point it would be 6 lanes. And so when we built that roadway, I think we did a great job of trying to plan for the future. So as you look at that roadway, for the most part, all the utilities are located out of the corridor. All the drainage is generally built, especially as you go from Mark Shuffle East all the way to probably about Falcon. In Falcon, it's a little bit different, but all we as a region are going to have to do is really widen that roadway to the middle. The drainage is generally in the right place. All the signals out in unincorporated El Paso County are in the right place. So I think, that can be done for a reasonable amount of money because we really did try to plan for the future. Have we done a study? No, but I think that we're going to have to start looking at that Woodman Road from a regional perspective. But what I would say is that much of that is being annexed into the city of Colorado Springs. So it may not be a large involvement from the county, although we do want to support that. And I think as we look at the future PPACG long-range plans, that's something that's probably going to have to be looked at in the next round. In regards to US 24, El Paso County, that's the other location to go into town. El Paso County recognized that we wanted to have significant plans for the future on US 24. We pushed to get funding for a study there. So there is actually a study in place that Cdot did, the Planning and Environmental Linkage Study, that looks at the future and what is needed on US 24. And so hopefully as funding becomes available, Cdot is able to plan and implement that. So,
yeah, it just seems like that Woodman corridor lends itself very well to a mass transit, public transportation thing with all the growth going on at Banning Lewis, north on Mark Shuffle, and all of that. I just see down the road that there's a great opportunity for some type of transit through there. So, but thank you.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I mean, the Stapleton-Briargate corridor study and the connection there is really critical, because that's the other east-west corridor. And actually, in some ways, although Woodman is there today, I think Stapleton-Briargate is even more important, because Stapleton-Briargate will provide a long-term connection from US 24, so I-25 to Powers Boulevard to US 24, and as we have constructed some of the elements, it will provide the connection down to Judge Orr Curtis, and then all the way back to Bradley. So I think that hopefully we've looked at that from a long-term standpoint. So it's not just Woodman, it's all the other east-west connections that we have planned. And so I know that, don't want to speak for the city, but they're looking at updating their major transportation corridors plan, and the county will be as well, beginning that effort here. And I think that those are the things that we're going to be looking at.
Okay, thank you. Somebody have a question? You? Go ahead.
Refresh my memory, which is failing fast. When are you going to do the CBC? I know you're going to have to try and coordinate with some other things, but I don't want to see this happen while you were waiting for it to happen and you're caught unawares.
So are you referring to the Mark Shuffle concrete box culvert?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll get to the maintenance program. I'll just talk to that and then address your item, because I talked about the capital. So on maintenance, we have budgeted $10.121 million. We are showing an approximate carryover forecast of $1.5 million, and then specifically identified for that Mark Shuffle Road concrete box culvert, and then also just a general 1.5. We'll see, we have some items that we're doing for maintenance that we're evaluating and seeing if we want to spend some additional money still this year to reduce that 1.5 carryover. In regards to the Mark Shuffle Road CBC, the city is going to be taking the lead on the remaining improvements on Mark Shuffle. We are actually going through the process of conveying the remaining parts of the county right-of-way to the city from Woodman all the way to US 24, and they're taking the lead on that. So we have been setting that aside and reserving that for use by the city as they look at that corridor.
Okay. Any other questions for the county? All right, thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate it. Hey, Bev, I got a question for Mike that I overlooked. The Platte Avenue study to I-25, that Platte Avenue study and access to I-25, what's the expected outcome of that? I mean, what do you're going to try to connect Platte to I-25? We're spending a couple $100,000.
It's way to the west end to help.
I think that study combined with what the corridor study to the east, those two will kind of play into what we're going to do. There's that connection has been looked at, and there's multiple thoughts there, but I think what we're looking at is how to make that more efficient. And because you come on Platte and then you got to turn on Cascade, and it could go anywhere from just some simple improvements to something pretty elaborate.
Okay.
I don't think we really know.
But we're not really thinking about putting an interchange at Platte and I-25, right?
No,
Okay.
no, because it's really, it's too close to Bijou, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, so the next one then is Manitou Springs, and that's on page 31. Jeffrey Jones had to go upstairs to a meeting, and he'll be back for 7C, which is his item about the maintenance facility. But John Merritt, who was the interim after Shelley left, put together this memo and the budget. And what's happening generally is they're paying the county back $200,000 this year out of the $1,021,000 that they borrowed. Some of that was up front at the beginning of this in 2015 and 2016, and that was so that they could get their projects going sooner. It takes a long time sometimes for the smaller member governments to accumulate enough for their couple projects, and so the county forwarded them some of their budget, and then now they're starting the payback. So that's one of the items. And then the rest of the memo just describes what they're planning to do in each of the capital projects and generally in maintenance. So I don't know if you have any questions for Jeffrey on Manitou Springs?
Not on this item.
Okay. Right, he'll be back for the other item. Then, let's see, Angie Spring from Green Mountain Falls put together the new memo that I handed out. And the most of the Stilling Basins gets the new dollar, the new monies, and Belvedere Avenue carryover is just a little bit different than her original memo. So there's not really much there. They're going to still do the usual maintenance there, and there's really not anything unusual there. So let's see. And then the last one, Cindy's here today, and that's page 33 for Rama. And their capital project is finished. The county helped them with that, so the allocation for their capital project went back then to the county. So the rest of it's maintenance, and do you have any questions for Sadie?
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Yes, welcome back.
And I just wanted to say, I know our carryover is even larger, and I know that was brought up. We've had some problems with employees. I know, we're so small, but we don't really have a street person, and it's coming back to me. So I'm going to have to start spending the money, but that's why the carryover is quite large. So we'll spend it. Don't you worry.
Where's the party?
Yeah.
Okay, so now that we've gone through the whole budget, are there any, do you recommend to the board to approve the budget as presented, or do you have some changes that you'd like to see?
I move approval of the budget as presented.
Second.
Did Joan had a question or a comment?
No, I was just going to make a motion.
Oh,
That's
okay.
fine.
Okay.
Okay, so Brian, you couldn't hear him, but Brian seconded it, so.
Sorry.
Could you just speak up?
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good presentation, folks. Nice. Thanks.
Thank you.
I guess I should ask, are there any public comments on the budget? I guess I should have asked that, but, okay, all right. Item number 7, 2019 Capital Maintenance Public Transportation.
Afternoon, Mike Chavis, City Engineering. I got actually I have 5 items for you to consider, and item number 6 is just an informational item. First item we have is a maintenance contract for cast cured-in-place concrete pipelining for a couple of pipes that are under streets at Union and Palmer Park for their operations and maintenance division to CNL Water Solutions. Next item is basically the renewal of NV5's program management. We competed that last year, and they were awarded it. We're exercising the first option year for $1.7 million. Last year it was $2.3 million, but we anticipated having another project engineer originally, but we didn't utilize that person. And then there's also some carryover, about I think $350,000 from last year's contract. So this year's request is less than last year's for their renewal.
So you're looking at a contract for 7 people at about $240,000 loaded cost per?
I haven't done that math that way, but yeah, that's probably about it.
Sign me up.
Hey, behind me.
They do provide quite a bit of service, and I know they do a good job, and that's one of the reasons why we're tracking well with the RTA projects. Next item is something I touched on last month or the month before, and that is an agreement number 3 with MVS. So let me pull that up. If I can I'll figure out how to operate this silly thing. Where'd it go? There it is. Is that it? Oh. So I believe in 2017, we came to the board. So MVS is a development company that owns, well, let me just get to that. They own a large, so this is dealing with this Centennial extension from Fillmore down to Fontenarrow. It's an RTA A-list project. MVS Development owns this large tract of land here, which they are looking at developing, but the site also has an old undocumented landfill, a dump. And they dedicated the right-of-way to the city for the Centennial, but they were also responsible for cleaning up the site. And they did approach us and said, you know, they proposed basically we'll clean up the site, the city's right-of-way, because we need the dirt that's under there, and in order to do their whole cleanup of the site, they approached us and asked if we would work with them. So what we have is this purple area is this old undocumented landfill, and there's a couple of fingers that come in under our right-of-way. So we had looked at it if we, and then this dotted line is kind of the cut slopes because we cut down to build the road. We had estimated that if we took on the cleanup of this area, it could be a $2 to $3 million price tag, and they came to us and we negotiated a price of $1.4 million for them to not only clean up our right-of-way, but also to grade the road down to the subgrade. And we came to you and to the board and said, we think this is a really good deal because it puts all the liability and the risk on MVS to take care of this. And so the board did approve that. And so MVS has been out there working, and they've got a fair amount of the grading done from the southern property line up to about here. They've still got some work to do there. They did come to us a couple months ago and said, lo and behold, there's more trash. It's deeper and a much bigger area than we thought. And we need more dirt. And so they made a proposal to grade 1,600 feet further south on the city's right-of-way to take the dirt. And we've been working with them, and we have come up with a dollar amount. We think it's fair, and we are actually asking the board to approve this amendment. And so on your log, the original amount was $1.4 million, and we're looking at another $1.2 million to have them do this other work so that they can use the dirt. So this is Van Buren, and they've kind of graded out to their property here currently. What they're going to do is, so here's their southern property, they're going to grade out 1,600 feet more of the alignment to, and this is 7th Street, short of 7th Street, and also create this, it's a temporary but also permanent water quality pond which the project needs to build. So we've worked out with them that 1.2 price tag to do this grading, which is work that needs to be done anyway. It'll help us get this project moving along further, because when they're done cleaning up their site, we'll have almost the whole road graded, mass graded to rough grade, what we call it. Again, we looked at the price that they're asking for help with, and we compared it to how much dirt's being moved, and the unit cost is reasonable with what we would probably pay. We're also getting this pond built, and they're also going to be building putting in some sleeves to get utilities across the roadway. So they're not just grading it, they're doing some other work, drainage work, temporary and permanent, because this site's going to sit for a while, and so we need to, get some drainage to protect it so we don't grade it down to where we want it, and then it just gets saturated with water as it's there. So they would create some drainage facilities to keep it dry. Overall, like I said, we think it's a good deal because it gets more of the Centennial alignment work done now instead of later. It also continues to put MVS on the hook to get the right-of-way cleared up and cleaned up. The state has kind of changed their requirements on them, and they're doing more work, but that's not something RTA is paying for. But like I said, they did need the dirt, and we said, okay, that we think this is a good deal. So what we're asking for is for the CAC to approve recommendation board of this amendment.
Compared with the original 1.4, how does this compare in size and scope to the original 1.4?
I think it's actually a little bit longer area than the length that's on their property. So the overall price of 1.2, when we compare to how much dirt they're taking out, I think the unit cost was about $12 a square cubic yard, which is about a good going rate based on other projects we've seen. And again, the advantage is this work will get done this coming year. We'll bid the remainder of the project in 2021. Prices could go up, so we think it's kind of hedges our costs right now.
Scott? How is this tracking with the overall estimated cost for the project? Are we still well within that, or
yes.
Are we looking like we're going to have a budget overrun?
No, I think this amendment fits into the unit cost that we anticipate we're going to have to pay either now or later have this work done, and it seems to be comparable to the estimates. Again, we think it's a good deal because it moves the project a little further. We're paying a reasonable price, and it also helps ensure that MVS is successful in getting their site prepped and our right-of-way prepped so we can actually build this road.
Carlos?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. So, Mike, is this contract dependent on being funded for the 2020 budget? I'm looking here at the memo. It looks like we don't have all the funds available. So, is this contingent on the approval of our 2020 budget to fully fund the project?
Yes. I left my thing, but I believe so.
So, are you entering a contract prior to the?
No, actually, this is an agreement to pay him a set amount of money, and it's paid on progress of his work. So as they do this work, they'll submit an invoice and billings that will pay a percentage of the work done. So it's not really a contract; it's more of an agreement. The agreement also this is a contingent on RTA, the city, and who else?
Yeah, I think they have MVS, the city, and PPRTA attorney's approval of this revised agreement.
So
what I don't see in there is that this revised agreement and approval of the 2020 budget.
Yes.
I understand we want to get started, but the funds are not technically the funds are not available to pay this project until we have the 2020 budget. I just wanted to make that clarification and explain that to the board, and maybe I see you have like a footnote in here. I just couldn't find it, but I just wanted to make that known, is that I don't think there's going to be a problem with that, but the 2020 budget will not occur until 2020, and then here we are with a revised agreement that says we're going to pay this out until prior to that budget being agreed upon.
Yes, and we're still working out the details of the agreement. The agreement also has clauses in there that if MVS fails to do this work And if they don't do the work, they don't get paid. But if we have to go in there and do the work for them, then there's mechanisms in there to bill them or to, recuperate our costs.
If this is contingent on 2020 funding, then the period of performance has to be January, not November.
Oh, we can change that.
David?
I'm shocked that there's a landfill there. I grew up over there.
It's all your tennis shoes.
I'm shocked there's a landfill there because I grew up over there.
I believe it was utilized in the 50s, and I don't think you're that old.
I am. My question is now is it okay that they did it the first time and they said, oh, we came back and it's bigger than we thought, so now we need to do it again. So are we confident that they know what they've got?
Yes, because the original landfill was identified through borings, and what happened is there was a ravine, and when they bored, they hit the side of the ravine, not the deepest part further on. As they've actually excavated and they've taken a lot of dirt out, they have a very good idea of exactly what's left and where it's at, and like I said, they found it. It's a little bit bigger and deeper than they thought, but they have those identified.
I didn't think we drank very much beer over there. Was there a reason they only used boring and not ground penetrating radar?
I'm not sure if ground penetrating radar is that accurate or that reliable, especially, because and it's very deep. Some of these cuts are like 20 feet just for the roadway, and there's like 10 feet of trash below that, so I don't think it would have worked.
Okay.
Okay.
Again, that's why when they came to us originally and said, if you help us, we'll clean it up, we said, that's a good deal, because then the risk is on you.
Yeah, got it.
All right, any other questions on that one? Next one is a change order for Max Green. They were contracted to do a traffic study in the Ivywild neighborhood because that neighborhood is adjacent to South Nevada where all the redevelopment is going on. A lot of growth. There's commercial on Nevada. There's some apartments going on Ramona. And so the neighborhood was concerned about what's going to happen with all this commercial and the traffic generation. So they were hired to do a study. And one of the things that came out through the public process is the neighborhood also thought that the interchange of Nevada and Tejon and I-25 was problematic, and they wanted to see what was going on there.
News alert.
Yeah. So through that process, we've got a change order to have Max Green do some study and some concept design on some improvements at the interchange there, and that's what this is about.
So, Mike, this is the Nevada Tejon I-25 thing and not the new traffic circle that was put in at Tejon and Cheyenne. I mean, this Ivywild, when I say Ivywild, I'm thinking the school right there.
No, the Ivywild neighborhood, which is,
all right. So this is primarily down around Tejon, I-25.
in that neighborhood,
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
The next item is the on-call renewals. There's a long list of contract renewals that we are asking for approval based on the original terms and conditions. Some of them are $200,000 limits. If they're bridge maintenance, they have a higher threshold. So this is kind of an annual thing that we renew these on-call that we use. And so those are the ones that actually need action. Then the last item is more of an informational. So we started the Black Forest widening design a few months back, and what we've been getting is a lot of calls, even before this project started, about cowpoke. Cowpoke has been developed, and there's a lot of housing next to it. It's become very busy. And at this time, it's a four-way stop, and it gets backed up. It's just a mess. So we've been getting calls about doing something, a signal or something, and we were thinking of just waiting till this project came along and signalize this cowpoke, but we think it's too dangerous, and we're at least a year before we go to construction, maybe even longer, depending on right-of-way acquisition and all that. So we want to put a temporary signal there to help with the situation, and that we've got a price of about $50,000 from a contractor. Wanted to just bring that to the CAC board to let them know, because we just feel it's from a safety standpoint, it's important to do something now.
Mike, do I read the last paragraph there properly, that to put the $50,000 signal in will cost us $1 million for property acquisition?
No. The signal's about $50,000. The other issue that's come up is with our stormwater requirements. When we disturb more than an acre on a project, we have to do water quality. And our early investigation is showing that we need a pond. We actually need two ponds, but one pond is going to have to go near the intersection of Woodman and Black Forest. And with all the development that's gone on, right now, the only property that's available is the parcel at the southeast corner of Vollmer and Black Forest in the map. And that's slated to be commercial. And we've actually contacted the owner to let them know that we're interested in buying that property before 7-Eleven or something gets put in there. But we are estimating the appraisal of that land may be anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million. And we just want to bring that to the board's attention because we've done water quality and it has added cost to our projects, but I don't think we've had, a land acquisition come to the board for the stormwater or for that high a dollar amount. And we just want to let you know, again, try not to surprise or come with any surprises to the CAC board, but we want to let you know that that's something that is probably going to have to be done. It's a requirement it's a regulatory requirement, but we just want to let you be aware of that.
Tony, you had a question?
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to make you aware, I don't know if you heard about this already, Mike. In CTAB yesterday, we actually voted to recommend to council that this stretch, exactly this stretch, be added to the truck route map for the city. Because of the cowpoke issue you were talking about, we don't want people going up the other direction and cutting across cowpoke with the trucks. So how is that going to affect all of your work if it's now that two-lane road is also truck route?
Yeah, but where does that truck route go beyond north of cowpoke? Because if you go to research, you've got the roundabouts, and that ain't going to work either.
We talked about the roundabouts, and it's going to.
So the truck route
basically goes to the end of the city limit there on Black Forest.
Oh, okay.
So from Woodman up to research is what you're. That's good information. No, I think the main effect would be is just our payment design may need to be tweaked a little bit, but other than that,
Yeah, but then where do they go when they get there? That's the county's problem?
Well, the county apparently doesn't have a truck route map, so any county road is available for trucks, is what we were told yesterday. So,
County roads are public roads, trucks can go over.
Okay.
So again, that one was just an informational item.
Joan, did you have a question?
No, I was just going to move for approval of the.
I understand. You had a question, Scott?
I have to recuse myself.
Okay. Okay, and Karen could I just, maybe I think we've got enough, can just recuse from the whole thing versus just the ones is that all right, acceptable with you guys? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and just a question, just procedural here. I know that item 6 on agenda item 7A is just an informational item, but it was included with the contract list. Just for completeness, do we need to, whatever motion, just say items 1 through 5? And that's it, just so we don't have the informational item?
Let Joan make her recommendation.
And just again, one more procedural thing. Again, since we do have the Centennial project being dependent on the 2020 budget approval, rather than saying as presented, with the note that the Centennial Agreement begins January with the 2020 budget. Do we need to do that? Is that important?
No.
Or do we just say as?
No, because we're not going to be ready to execute this agreement and start making payments until next year.
Understandable. I may be just in the minutia here, but, we are, yeah, okay. All right, that's it. Thank you.
Joan?
I would move recommendation for items 1 through 5 from the city's contract list as presented.
Recommend approval?
Yeah, approval.
Second.
Second. Further discussion. Carlos's notes noted. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, moving along. 7B, Manitou.
All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Jeff Jones, I'm the new Public Works Director for Manitou Springs.
Welcome.
Been there as the director about 2 weeks, been employed in Manitou about 4 months, so bear with me here. We'll try to get through. We have two efforts or two requests that we'll be discussing today. The first one will be the utilization of funds for maintenance and transportation support equipment. This equipment's primary use is going to be for our streets department to use for snow plowing as well as for street sweeping. It has an auger attachment with hydraulics that we'll be using to put up street signs and other street accoutrements that go along with it. Also, we'll be using it on our narrow streets for asphalt replacement, as we need that definitely up through some of the streets. I'm sure you've been through there. Now, you'll notice that on the handouts you probably have is that it will be used in other departments as well, but the majority of the use will be in the streets. That's why we were asking just the $24,000 from the PPRTA portion. The remaining $41,000 will come from other sources that will be used for it. To help pay for that. This is a very versatile. I think you have pictures. I'm not sure if
Yeah, we do.
Okay, so this is any folks that have dealt with any of these Bobcats know that this is a very versatile piece of equipment that can be used for many things. It has a hydraulic bed on the back of it where you can dump aggregate in different holes that you have. When you're compacting for street before you asphalt. It has a large attachment for snow removal for parking lots in our areas, also a smaller blade for sidewalks, and then, of course, the broom for doing street sweeping, which I have a lot of up there. And we believe this will be probably one of the highest used items, piece of equipment we have once we get it there in Manitou. I'm looking for your approval on that and take your questions.
Questions? Carlos?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for that presentation. This may be a question for Mr. Sonnenborg. Does Board Policy number 24 apply to the purchase of this equipment? This has to do with PPRTA-funded vehicles. Board Policy number 24.
I think I heard.
Well, that's the question.
I think I heard him use the word specialized equipment. Did I not?
Yes.
Well, specialized vehicle, just the question's there.
We have purchased specialized vehicles for the city on numerous occasions, and I don't know about the county, but certainly for the city.
The answer is yes. Board Policy 24 has 8 lines in it. The third line is continue the practice of purchasing specialized vehicles and equipment.
The question.
Oh, go ahead, Brian.
The question that I have is capital versus maintenance. This request is for maintenance, to utilize maintenance funds for a capital purchase.
For maintenance purpose.
The cities came originally from maintenance funds.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a capital item to Manitou, but to us, we don't own it. So, when you get your little accounting hat on, you go, well, we'd have to capitalize that over here and then depreciate it. But we don't, because we don't own anything. So for the RTA, these items are just a pass-through expenditure, so it's not a problem.
And most of the 30 vehicles that the board has approved for the city of Colorado Springs for us to write the check and for them to own have been maintenance vehicles paid for out of their PPRTA maintenance funds. Paint striping, epoxy, applying the plastic epoxy.
Pothole trucks.
Crossing line.
Pothole trucks.
Pothole trucks.
Meltdowns and everything else.
So,
Mr. Chair.
Tony?
I'd like to make a motion for approval of this contract.
Thank you.
Second.
And Joan, second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. 7C.
All right. Outstanding. So that was the easy one. Let's go to the interesting one here. That I'm sure I've already had many questions about it. So obviously, this effort here, or this request, has to do with a maintenance facility. So a little background that was shared with me on requests over the years since the PPRTA has been in effect is there was a request in 2005 from the city of Colorado Springs for a northern maintenance facility asking for about $4 million. I believe it was $4 million over a 3-year period. And they asked for $4 million, and obviously they have several facilities. Now, how ours differs of what we're asking for, yes, it is a maintenance transportation facility, no doubt. Okay? But here's how it differs from that one request 14 years ago that wasn't approved. And how it differs is that, well, for one thing, it was 14 years ago, and things have changed since then. The second is we're asking only $350,000 versus $4 million. That is a huge difference, okay? And that is obviously a difference of $3,650,000. And probably the biggest difference of all is that Colorado Springs has many maintenance facilities. We have one. And that one maintenance facility is inadequate. It is horrible shape. It has had air quality problems. Right now, I have 27 people displaced out of that facility into a trailer to do their work, and it's very difficult to get anything done. The building itself, I can't remember the year it was built, but it was, I believe, it was in the 70s, early 70s. The total funding in order to get this building remodeled is going to be more than $350,000. So we are looking at other funds and other ways to raise the money. It's a little over $525,000 to do it right, do it properly. And it's the hub. And I'll tell you right now, this facility will be the conduit and for us to succeed with the transportation corridor through Manitou. You got to have a good facility to work out, to do maintenance in, to care for your equipment and everything else. And right now we do not have that. We're literally working out of a trailer. It doesn't even have any bathrooms in it. Okay? And the facility that I'm looking for the monies for actually has one bathroom for 28 people, and that's about 23 male and about 4 females. Okay. Something needs to be done. Something has to be done. It's not a question of if, it's a question of how. And that's why I'm here asking for use of maintenance fund for a maintenance and transportation building to further our abilities to do our work there in the corridor there in Manitou Springs.
Red?
I want to make one comment. Our PPRTA, and Rick gave a definition, a legal definition, refers to transportation, does not address facilities, whether they're a building, an office, or anything else, and I don't think we should touch it. I agree with what was decided in 2005. Mr. Heimlecker, I think, Yeah, Mr. Heimlicher made the motion. We promised the citizens, it was our position as an oversight, and what was put forth in the ballot, that these were transportation issues, not building. We don't, is the city of Colorado Springs going to come back and ask us to improve their maintenance? It specifically states that transit has maintenance money and capital. This is not a capital project, and it's not a maintenance project. It's a problem that the city of Manitou Springs has adopted or addressed or trying to address through us.
Yes, ma'am. Karen?
I'm curious how the ballot issue is written that allows the monies to be used for employees, like the NV5 employees, for that to be acceptable, but not something like this.
They're contractors.
Rick, you got any ideas?
Yep. Yeah, I've got. For clarification, just bring the whole binder.
The CAC and the board, since day one, have been agreeable to having the program management assistance for the city to manage their maintenance and capital programs. NV5, previously Nolte, was approved in the first few months in 2005 and has continued till today, including today. They are a consulting firm doing program management, and it's been deemed to be acceptable.
They weren't hired for city pay.
Now, correct us, RTA funds are not used to pay for city employee salaries?
Correct.
So it's different as a contractor for program management and stuff than it is for city employees, and that's been since day one, pretty much.
Yes. The board decided on day one that the PPRTA would not send checks to any member governments for their employees doing PPRTA work. So that's when the city said, well, then, to do all this work, we need help. If we can't get PPRTA money for additional city employees to do this work, then we, the city, need to ask PPRTA to come up with the money for program management assistance, and the CAC and the board have said yes since day one.
Because the objection was against permanent employees.
Tom and then Joe.
I think that the reason we're struggling here is because as we've gone through this process, we've approved landscaping for HOAs where we've done road work in the area. We've done highway information signs before we hand them over to Cdot. And if I recall, we pitched in a bunch of money to buy a transit facility having to do with the West Colorado project at one point. And I think we have really been very liberal in the use of the term transportation. And I think if we're going to start drawing a hard line on that, we better start. Otherwise, we'll just do more spine roads and call them maintenance projects and stuff.
Joan, you had, and then Carlos.
And Jim.
Yeah, I guess I look at this a little differently, and maybe not so hardcore. This strikes me as a health and safety issue, and that I think is paramount. The city of Manitou Springs is not the city of Colorado Springs or any other entity. This is a small city. I understand that there would be concern that it was going down a slippery slope. They are asking for $350,000, which could be, as a cap, put in a motion not to exceed in the future. But I think we need to look at this from a more holistic point of view rather than simply a black and white point of view.
I got a little bit of an order going here.
Carlos was next.
Carlos, and then, yes, ma'am.
Sorry.
Brian, and then you.
I heard the comments here about the distinction here between, we've had a lot of discussions, examples of capital projects, but this is a maintenance. You're asking for maintenance money, right?
Correct.
And right now, what was proposed, what was put to the voters as far as maintenance, okay, versus capital was, and correct me if I'm wrong, was back in 2004 to the voters, and then it goes in perpetuity, right, versus the capital projects, which was renewed. So just on the ballot, it says for the purpose, and this is the PPRTA tax. It's for the purposes of funding maintenance, repair, and operation for roadways and bridges. And that's what the ballot says. It says for the purpose for funding maintenance, repair, and operations for roadway and bridges. So the question is, does this building fit in that definition, which may have some flexibility on that? So,
absolutely it does.
And which one is that? Is it for the purpose? Is it repair?
It's both. It's for the bridges
Maintenance?
and for the maintenance and repair for both, yes.
Wouldn't it fit more into the operations category for a building, for the?
Say that again, please.
Wouldn't it be more the operations?
The building itself,
How does a building help with the maintenance, repair, and operations for roadways and bridges?
well, first of all, you have to plan before you go out and do it, so you need a facility in order to do that. You have to maintain your equipment, you have to store your equipment. So that, right there, if you don't have the facilities that where you can sit down and you can plan for the maintenance that you're going to do, then you're just planning to fail. So that has direct impact on everything that gets done there as far as maintenance on roadways and bridges and anything else we do.
Brian and then Tony.
Jeff, I want to first empathize with you because, you got dropped into this.
It's a good starter project.
I'll tell you. A couple of issues that I have. I understand the facility is necessary for Manitou Springs, and I sympathize with that. I also sympathize with Joe's comments about health and safety. However, I don't see this as a PPRTA responsibility. I see it as a city of Manitou Springs responsibility. And when I look at last night's election, the voters of Manitou allowed the city of Manitou to keep excess funds, but turned down a tax increase. So if the citizens of Manitou aren't willing to step up and pay a tax increase to help the facilities that need it, why should the rest of El Paso County?
Well, that's a good question. So I would say this. The people that visit our fair city aren't just the people that live there. The people that visit that city are from all over the county, Colorado Springs, all over the country. And they come there to enjoy several things. One being the Cog Railway, that'll be back in effect in about a year or so. And the second thing is Manitou Incline. We have a very big influx. And with that, with people coming there, it also brings money into the western side of the Colorado Springs corridor. So I would think that if you poll 10 people on the street, and you put the question to them is, should the government of Colorado Springs spend money on a maintenance facility so we can maintain our town? I think 8 out of 10 would say yes, because they know that you got to have a facility to maintain it in order for them to bring all the people there. You made a valid point with the voting about keeping money and not raising taxes. Don't have the answer to that, to be honest with you. But I do know this. Like I said before, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of how, and this is one avenue to go forth and possibly get part of the money at least to get it done, because it is super important, because it's becoming a very serious issue with things.
And I do feel bad.
Yeah, it's a tough situation. And somebody had said earlier, we are not Colorado Springs, and I believe that you said that, and it's very, very true. We don't have the funds, not even close. We don't have other maintenance facilities. We have this one, and this one only, to do our maintenance and our transportation fixes.
I've got a couple of comments here, and one is that if this were the city of Colorado Springs coming forward asking this, I think this conversation would be very different. And that's a problem, that it would be different. Because quite frankly, the rule should be applied evenly across all member governments. So saying Manitou is not Colorado Springs, so what? That, the rule still needs to be applied fairly across. Now, that being said, I do believe that this is a fair use of maintenance funds. But I know that when Colorado Springs comes and asks for the exact same thing, there's going to be a number of people in this room who are going to say, that's not right. That's not how it's supposed to be used. So, we got to make sure, if we're going to approve this, that we are going to apply this fairly across the board. I think it would be a fair use, because you're right. You have to have a place to store your equipment. You have to have a place to repair your equipment, to plan out the everything. That's all part of the job of maintenance. So I think that's a fair use.
Cheryl.
Thank you. You're asking for $350,000 on
Yes,
this, but your budget for 2020 is only $305,000.
It's half of their total for their projected next year's budget.
I can't hear you, sorry.
Big carryover.
They have a rollover, and counting that rollover, this would basically be half of their 2020 maintenance funds.
Right, so what will you be giving up? What can't you do in 2020 when you're using the rollover and all of your 2020 budget?
What can't we do if we use this money toward the facility?
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what we can't do if we don't repair the facility, a lot more than we can if we give the money away. There will be, there's road repair that has to take place, of course, and we know that. We'll do as much as we can with that money that we have for it, and then we'll look for other grants and other ways to do it as well if we have to. But the point is, without this maintenance facility, I don't see how anything's going to get done properly. I think is the bigger issue of it. Not just what are we going to be able to give up, but what do we give up if we don't get a new facility here? And I think that's a taller list or a longer list than what we would have to give up if we get the money for the facility. And that's probably not what you want to hear, but
Well,
that's...
no, and I'm just thinking of your obligation to pay back the county, for the West Colorado Avenue project.
Right.
And that kind of thing. Then you had a transit facility also slated to occur.
Hiawatha Gardens, yeah.
Yeah. So I am just concerned that while you're spending this, large chunk of money of Manitou's fair share of the PPRTA funds, that you'll be sacrificing some of the other more immediate needs. And again, I hear you saying, well, you couldn't do those anyway. But again, you've been suffering, and I completely agree with that. You've been suffering for many years in an inadequate facility, which should have been addressed by Manitou Springs City.
Yeah.
So I'll make a couple of comments. First, the votes last night were to carry over funds for just the downtown. They could not be used for this. The tax increase that failed was for arts, culture, and heritage. Nothing to do with this at all. So Manitou has not addressed in a ballot issue whether or not they would vote funds for something like this. I agree with Joan. This is basically a health and safety issue, and it's key to them being able to actually operate and maintain the streets in Manitou. So I think it is absolutely appropriate. I agree with Tony that if it's appropriate for Manitou, it ought to be appropriate for any other entity, but I think it's an appropriate use of maintenance funds, and I think we should approve it. Thank you.
If I may.
Wait, one second, Richard. Cindy was first.
Oh, I'm sorry, thank you.
I just had a question. You say that there are 30 people working out of this complex?
28 right now.
Are they all street people, or are there other things that are done out of this? Well, you say.
Well, we do
public
have a lot of street
services.
people in there too. But the ones that work with me are, no, they're not all. Of course not.
Because public services, what else are a lot of things handled out of this building besides?
Absolutely.
roads?
That's why we're not asking for a full amount for just like the purchase of the Bobcat, the tool cat, is that other entities will be using. They'll be
Can
mainly
I
used.
ask
Sure.
how it's?
Oh, sure, I can tell you. We have streets people, parks people, facilities people, and utilities folks.
Okay. So
That
quite
would-
a few,
There is, but the majority of folks that we have are the streets and folks. that
the
work
street
here.
people.
The street people.
Okay.
Okay, Richard.
I'm learning quite a bit today, and I appreciate it. And I've got some homework to do. The thing that bothers me is this, there are things going on with the use of PPRTA money that I really, as a highway person, detest. I've been in highways for my entire career of 40-some years. And I'll do what little I can as one person, working hopefully with others to try to make some changes. So if I'm the only person here that's going to vote no, that's fine with me, because I don't approve of using funds that are either maintenance or capital improvements for a building to store gondolas or most anything. I want to see it out there where the people are driving, bicycling, walking, whatever. So you approve this, I do agree. If you approve it for one jurisdiction, you ought to approve it for everyone. And that makes it all the worse from my perspective. So that's the end of my comments.
Could I propose a question? Someone had mentioned putting a cap on it. Would that be a possibility? That way it wouldn't be, because nothing against Colorado Springs. I love Colorado Springs. I live there here. But the point is, Colorado Springs is not going to ask for $350,000. They might come back and ask for $3.5 million for a facility. I just don't know if that's a possibility. I believe you had brought that up. Somebody had brought that up with a cap.
All right, Scott and then me.
So we discussed earlier with Mountain Metropolitan Transit about a new bus maintenance facility. Is none of the funding from that coming from RTA?
It's coming from transit funds.
But it's still RTA funds, right?
They have 10% and they have capital funds for it. They mentioned that they were using capital money. And is Craig still in? Brian is. They put in a facility, what?
She's a part of RTA for the match.
It's part of the capital program out of the 10%.
Yes.
Right.
But we are using RTA
RTA.
funds as part of the cost for building at the end of the day, which is what's being proposed here.
Yes.
It's not, yeah, but it's not maintenance funds. It's
not
part of the 10% dedicated to transit, that transit owns for their capital and maintenance program. It's their money.
I understand. But it's still RTA dollars that are going towards maintenance.
Separate program.
Yeah, okay, so I've listened to everybody, and I'm gonna get my 2 cents worth for this thing. Everybody's made some good points. I can see both sides of this in terms of where it goes. My personal belief is that we're going down a slippery slope, and somebody's already said that, but what's to prevent Rama from having to replace their building to house their dump truck, or Colorado Springs to come back in and rehab the building for all of their road equipment and stuff and this, that, and another. And we end up now, we're truly trying to defend why we're maintaining city facilities for member governments out of our money that was clearly voted for the people to go towards transportation infrastructure. And so it may be gray now. If we go down this road, it's not going to be so gray. It's going to be more black. And now we're trying to defend a weak policy that we didn't have to begin with. So my comment in going down this road. So, all right. So is there anyone else that, Rick? Yeah, why don't you start? Maybe you can.
I'll make it more gray. In the state law, there's a second sentence, and I'll cherry pick to abbreviate it. The term, meaning regional transportation system, includes any real property or interest that is appurtenant or related to any improvement that transports or conveys people. So the state law seems to allow it. Now, the handout that I put at each place indicates that the board on April 29 of 2005 said no to the city to building a new building over a 3-year period for $4 million. So the board back then said no. The state law, which Mr. Robertson correctly summarized, is extremely broad and generous. And as Scott pointed out, we're heading towards PPRTA transit money to be matching a federal grant for building. So you have a nice tug of war there.
But we also used RTA money several years ago to buy Hiawatha Gardens, or it was a contribution towards the total purchase of that building years ago, that they were going to turn into a transit center. So
that was capital, and Scott's pointed out that transit's going to be helping build a building, and this is a request for maintenance. So,
right,
Mr. Chair, Rick, in your handout here, I mean, I see the recommendation where they said remove the facility from that motion, but I didn't see anything in the discussion that actually referenced why they wanted to remove that building. Am I missing something?
No, I didn't hit the minutes, and I found this even though it's before I was hired, but I found the minutes, and the minutes are all we have.
Okay. So we don't know really what the reasoning of the board was on that decision, just that they decided not to fund that building.
Right.
Okay.
Wait a minute, Joan. Go ahead, Brad. Then we're going to call for questions. Just 1 second, John.
Health and safety are not an issue for PPRTA.
Okay, Joan. You had, and we're going to wrap this
I'll
up.
respectfully disagree with that, but I think just because of what happened in 2005, does that bind this CAC and the board from moving forward to considering issues in the future that may in fact have an impact? And if the statute says real property or interest improvement, I think we have the backing of the statute to say that this is an approved use. It is Manitou's maintenance money, and I think it's disingenuous, for me at least, to say that we don't care about people's health and safety.
I had a two-part answer. No, there's no board policy on this, and a single action of a prior board is not binding on a future board. So it's a single action. It's not necessarily a precedent. It's not a controlling precedent. It's not a policy. With regard to the the very broad and generous and liberal state statute, the board doesn't have to do everything that's in the statute. They can do what they'd like, just because gondolas are specifically listed, so just because somebody comes in and says they want to buy a gondola, that doesn't mean the board has to say yes. So the statute is not a mandate for everything in the list. It's just a very broad enabling, and you can pick out of that what you or the board would like to do.
And I understand and I appreciate that, but I think for me, I'd like to see this go forward to the board, let the board make the decision, that it's ultimately their call. If we squash it today, then it doesn't have the ability to go before the board.
No, it'll go. It'll go. They can turn it. They can turn it around.
Even if we vote no, it's still.
All right.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Point of clarification, please.
Yeah.
What is the relationship between the state statute and the IGA?
The IGA and the state statute?
Yeah, you keep referring to the state statute, that okays whatever we do based on the state statute, or are we talking about what the voters okayed for the RTA?
Well, that was going to be my comment, is voter intent and state statute may be different. So as a Citizens Oversight Board, that's a concern for me, is voter intent. But, okay, so let's, Carlos, one last thing, and we're calling this to vote.
No, really, again, just, I with a lot of people, a lot of deference to the member governments to spend their money. I wanted to hear from Mr. Hart what your thoughts were. You've been very quiet. If I can put him on the spot, and you don't have to answer, that's it.
Well, I think that that facility up there not only deals in, quote, transportation, but it also the coordination center for everything that goes on on the streets of Manitou for ingress and egress. The COG road, when it gets back to operating, they're the ones that are going to have to deal with the traffic jams that are going on, and the police department enforce it. Everybody who lives in the metro area, and I want to say this, I am tired of the city of Colorado Springs. When they sneeze, everybody's got to get a napkin. So it's time that we all work together and solve the darn problem. This is just one step in that direction. Now, I have some issues with the city of Manitou as it relates to Ann and I. We could have known more about it, maybe a little different strategy, or come up with some different kind of ideas. But the point is, it's a need, and that's where I'm at.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so is anyone willing to put this up, Ann?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve the use of $350,000 of Manitou's maintenance money for this use as an appropriate use of maintenance dollars.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Okay, I'm going to ask for a show of hands, please. Is that okay? I'm going to ask for a show of hands so we can get an accurate count. So all those in favor of the proposal as recommended, raise your hand.
I'm counting 6.
So that's what I counted. All those opposed? Nine to 6 against.
I believe you had 2 abstain. I can't vote. Oh, you can't vote. I abstained.
You abstained, so 1 abstention. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Okay. So here's what I'll do, folks. I think I relay this conversation to the board pretty well. So I've made several notes during this. So I will present as best I can the in-depth discussion we had around this subject. The board can then, you make the same presentation to the board. The board can then make their own decision, and we'll go with what the board comes up with. Fair enough? Okay.
Thank you.
Make a comment?
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Could I make a comment about it? Joan, despite what you think, I'm not immune to the feeling of public safety and health. But we have a fire department to go fight fires. We don't have to furnish them money. We have a public health department to take care of your health. We're not included in that either.
Okay. Next item, number 8A, member governments and other reports. Brian, thanks for hanging in there, buddy.
Sure. Good afternoon. Brian Mazzulli,
Come away from these so enlightened, right?
Yeah. City of Colorado Springs Mountain Metro Transit with your monthly transit report. For our fixed route service, we provided a little over 293 one-way trips in September of this year. That's an increase of almost 11% over September of 2018. So we're continuing on a really good positive trend, ridership-wise. For ADA paratransit services, we provided over 11,000 trips. It's a decrease of almost 13%. And for our van pool services, we operated 25 van pools in this September, provided 3,500 trips. And that was a slight decrease of 4% over that same time period. Project update, we're continuing moving toward completing our 2045 Regional Transit Plan and the Specialized Transportation Coordination Plan. We had our final advisory committee meeting on October 23rd. We're now on our second review of both of those plans. These will likely go out for public comment next week, I believe, next Tuesday or Wednesday. So there will be, additional opportunities for the public to review those and comment on them. The North Nevada Avenue Transit Connectivity Study, we're holding our second round of stakeholder meetings tomorrow. So we have a technical advisory committee, and we have a citizens advisory committee. And Mr. Godfrey and Mr. Julia are the RTA reps for that project. So that's something that's moving forward pretty well. There's a lot of involvement. We had 2 office hour public meetings a couple weeks ago in the corridor at Building 3 Coffee on Cascade and Wild Goose Meeting House on Tejon Street. So they generated a lot of discussion, and so that's good. And so we're looking at carry on that momentum with tomorrow's stakeholder meetings. So we're kind of getting to the part now where we're looking to make some recommendation based on the analysis that's happened on both the type of mode and also alignment. So as you know, that the primary corridor for this study is North Nevada Avenue, north of Fillmore, to Austin Bluffs and Garden of the Gods. But it's also looking at how transit transitions north to UCCS and University Village, but also south of downtown. And the tricky part is how do we navigate south of Fillmore through downtown or through the neighborhoods and to downtown. So, there are a series of alignments that we looked at, and tomorrow's stakeholder meetings will kind of get into that. So we're getting into a really important and interesting part of the project, and this is looking to wrap up most likely next June or July. So there's more to come on that. And just to give a little bit of context, in my report here I said fixed route ridership is up, almost 11%. ADA paratransit ridership is down. This is kind of a trend we've seen for the last couple of months. And I've said over the months there are many factors that are going into the way our ridership reacts. The economy, fuel prices are still pretty low. People have access to pretty affordable car loans. Now you can get car loans for 6-7 years, so it's providing opportunities for people to take a private vehicle. But, the CASTA award that Craig mentioned earlier, the Colorado Association of State Transit Agencies, says we got a large Community Transit Agency of the Year award. Part of that was primarily improving access to our transit system. So we added, 1.3 miles of sidewalk. We've improved our bus stop conditions, curb cuts, bus and shelter pads. So I think a lot of that is enabling our customers to have better access to our fixed route system. So that's where we could be seeing some of the ridership increases coming from, and the decreases on our ADA-powered transit system. So if people are able-bodied enough to walk to a bus stop, but they're limited by no sidewalks or no bus pads or things like that, it's a barrier. So I think as we improve those conditions, we'll continue to see ridership react that way.
Brian, in that vein, would it be possible for you to add 2 lines to this report? The one being taking the local, the ADA, and the van pools all together into a single number, last year, this month, this year, this month, and then a rolling 12 months from, say, July 1st of last year to June 30th of this year kind of thing, and compare the 3 of them together, because they're all transporting people, as opposed to segregating them into different categories. Just look at it and see if it makes sense to have it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
If I may, I'll let Tony speak to the regional plan, and Brian, you may have mentioned this. I was taking some notes. I apologize. But there is a survey and some stuff so that committee's producing. So,
Yeah.
Tony, you want?
Rick, do you have that link that you could send out to everybody? Have you gotten that for the 2045 transportation and specialized study?
I have it as long as it, and I'll be more than glad to send it as long as it's allowed for me to send it.
Yeah, it's one that goes out to the public, and they're encouraging everybody to log on, take a look at what we've done on this study so far, and give public input. We're about to open it up for the 30-day.
Next week, right?
Next week it starts the 30-day public feedback portion of this, and so hopefully by the end of the year it'll be finalized. That's what we're looking at.
Right. Yeah, and on the 3rd page of my report here, where it talks about these 2 planning projects, there are links to the project websites.
Right, I was just curious.
And I believe you can get to those questionnaires that way. So.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so, but there's information, and the North Nevada study is equally as interesting, and so for those that have been around a while, that it may have comments on where they're what they're trying to address in that corridor study. I'd be interested in hearing them as well. We don't have a survey out yet, a public survey out yet, though, do we?
Through this project website, there is a questionnaire
Okay.
on the North Nevada study. Yes.
Okay. So anyway, just informing you, we're trying to track that, and please go investigate that and share it with your network of folks. Any other questions for Brian? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for hanging in there. City change order report, some acquisition stuff. Any questions for Mike? He's walked all the way up here.
Yeah. Well, actually, I did want to make a little announcement. In conjunction with this, if there's no questions, but the American Council of Engineering Companies actually awarded the Academy Cottonwood Creek Bridge Project award, found out today, for innovative solutions. So that's
Awesome.
won an award. So.
Awesome.
So.
That is so much improved. Bob, what?
Richard Bob.
Do you go by Richard, Bob, or Robert? Richard. Okay.
That particular bridge was listed as an A-list project. and it was determined, and we approved them buying a brand-new bridge as opposed to a rehabilitation because of the lifespan. So we do know how to go outside of the lines. It also got, the cycle group presented it, and it got a bikeway underneath it that is protected from flooding, I guess, some way. But literally,
Okay. Yeah.
I just want.
Okay. Item 9, administrative actions. Any other questions on the report of board actions? Any questions on that? Definitions of maintenance projects and capital. We're going to postpone that.
Yes?
Is that due next month?
Hopefully.
Is it next month that you said, Jim? I can see you rattle your head.
I wasn't going to bring that up. I didn't do it, Reb did it.
I asked my assistant to provide Rick and Bev some time that the county is available for some meetings. We're ready to talk about it.
Great.
So probably a motion to postpone would be in order.
Have a motion to postpone this discussion another month. Joan?
So moved.
Joan?
Motion to
Scott? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any approved? Okay, thank you. Appointment, reappointment process?
Mr. Chair,
Yes?
yesterday CTAB voted to reappoint me, so I don't know who you get that from, but.
Probably Jacqueline, yeah, hopefully, or maybe your chair.
So this is what's coming up. So you want to?
Yeah, we're waiting to hear official communications for Tony, Larry, Mr. Hart. I think I've already gotten that one, and Joan. The at-larges, Gene, Jim Godfrey, and David Chestnut, all three of those have applied for reappointment for either at-large or at-large alternate, and we do have, and today's the deadline, I'll go at 5 o'clock, I'll close it out, but we do have one applicant that's not a current CAC member, but since we have 2 at-large regular positions and 2 at-large alternate positions and 3 in-house candidates and 1 a candidate from outside, we have 4 for 4, so we'll see what and then the board has a subcommittee of the board chair, board vice chair, and the CAC chair that go over the applications for the at-larges. So they'll set up that meeting sometime after next Wednesday.
Thank you. Cdot update.
Mainly what Jennifer Irvin announced orally at the last meeting, I put it in writing this time. It's the bold in the memo that Cdot has found the funding to replace the County Line Road Bridge, which is now included in the project.
Well, I rode under that thing the other day and looked up at it. It's in bad shape. Anyway. Any other agenda for next month's topics from anyone? Okay. Any communications from any of the members? Jennifer?
Yes, just I hope everybody got my email saying that we're leaning heavily to January 2nd instead of New Year's Eve day for the January meeting. Is everybody okay with January 2nd is a Thursday, because January 1st, a holiday, is the first Wednesday.
Quick question. Are the due dates going to be different?
No. Well, I'll take a look at the calendar and send that out.
Okay, so no communication of anybody. We're adjourned. Thank you. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, Jennifer's got something. Hold on,
Thank you for the time. I just wanted to remind everybody we are, and hopefully you got your email or invitation. We are having the ribbon cutting for Colorado Avenue on November 15th at 10 a.m.
I didn't get that.
You didn't get it? Okay, well, okay. We'll make sure you get it.
Is it a Wednesday?
It's a Friday, 10 a.m. Second thing, and as I was sitting here, I just got notified that Cdot was awarded $18 million for the build grant. So that's less than the $25 million requested, but I have been in discussions with Cdot, and we will be making that project still work. So that's
Awesome.
good news.
Awesome. November 15th, what time?
10 a.m. RV Park. Thank you. Where the groundbreaking was held.
Yep, okay,
Same location.
awesome.
I
Okay,
will
we're
make sure that everybody gets those.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for the long meeting and good input.